Chapter 672. For this, venerable devil ape even allowed his clansmen to drink his divine blood to help them grow faster. However, in order to perfect the demonic ape race that he created, he began to create some new life forms to work together. Day after day, year after year, the wheels of time rolled. However, venerable devil ape had an obsession in his heart. This battle was incomparably tragic. The devil ape clan had sacrificed more than half of their clansmen, but they still couldn't contend with the powerful corpse clan head-on. In the following days, venerable devil ape started to search for the descendant of the corpse race. He swore that he would definitely find his soul because this was the only way for him to resurrect his deceased clansmen. Apart from the black iron rod, he was accompanied by a pile of stone coffins. The black iron rod told venerable devil ape that as long as one became an ancient god realm expert, they would have the ability to create. They would be able to create their own domain and even new life forms. This battle lasted for more than 30 days. The nearby mountains collapsed, the vegetation decayed, and all the vitality was destroyed by the aftershocks of their battle. In this lush western world, a special domain isolated from vitality was formed. He wanted to revive his clansmen and find the corpse god's soul orb. On that day, the ape's roar resounded throughout the entire second realm. The black cudgel tore through the sky like a dragon, smashing through the clouds and clashing head-on with the zombie divinity. Supremacy Demonic Ape led the demonic ape race through the spatial barrier and arrived at the Purgatory Dao's second domain world that he was once extremely familiar with. This was because they were absolutely not a match for the corpse race in a head-on confrontation. Although the soul-devouring beast was terrifying, it was equally terrifying to the corpse race. As long as they used it reasonably, the soul-devouring beast would also be their protective umbrella against the corpse race. Among them was a creature that the venerable demonic ape was very familiar with, the flame-devouring dragon. The zombie goddess was also gradually discovering that she was no longer a match for the Lord Demonic Ape. The second creature he created was a creature similar to the corpse race, the corpse spirit. After creating it, he raised it in this world. Therefore, he worshipped the black iron rod every day. Even after becoming a god, he never stopped worshipping it. This was a desolate world. There didn't seem to be any living creatures. As far as the eye could see, there was only surging lava and cracked earth. This was the only pure land in venerable devil ape's heart, and he was the only one who could go there. Blood food is only blood food in the end. Even if you have a fortuitous encounter, you won't be able to escape this fate. You will only end up like your clansmen. However, there was not a trace of confusion in his heart, because the thought of revenge gave him endless motivation. Even though the devilish ape tribe had also suffered several waves of attacks from the soul-devouring beasts, and close to half of their tribe members had perished, the devilish ape venerable devilish ape still managed to hold on with great difficulty in the end. In the end, a brand new demonic ape race was born. However, the black metal rod's answer was impossible. This was his declaration of war against the corpse race, his struggle against his own fate, and his hatred for his clansmen who were willing to sink into oblivion. Even though there were many soul-devouring beasts protecting them, they were completely unable to do anything to the corpse goddess, and they were all shattered into countless fragments with a wave of her hand. In that battle, the demonic ape race unleashed all of their combat power and destroyed several cities of the corpse race. They headed straight for the main city of the corpse race. At this moment, the corpse race had no choice but to hope that their ancestor, the corpse god, would return as soon as possible. The corpse god was extremely fearful of the venerable devilish ape's aptitude, and he also felt threatened by it. In that instant, the deaths of his clansmen triggered the venerable devilish ape, and he roared angrily into the sky, hating the tragic fate of his clansmen. In the days that followed, the venerable devilish ape began to teach his clansmen the body-strengthening technique he had obtained from the black metal rod, and he also taught them knowledge. At the same time, He led his clansmen to pray to the black metal rod every day, hoping that it would continue to protect him and his clansmen. He didn't want to walk this path of absolute power alone. He wanted to lead his clansmen to climb to the top with him. However, the venerable devilish ape was always able to avert disaster with his clever arrangements, and his clansmen also began to evolve by devouring the bloodline power of the corpse race members. During this battle, the venerable devilish ape's body was crippled, and even his soul was injured. However, he still managed to hold on with great difficulty under the protection of the black metal rod, and he continued to roar as he pounced toward the corpse god. The two of them had fought countless times, but this time, the venerable devilish ape was no longer the weakling who couldn't even put up a fight as his clansmen died. On that day, two extremely special children were born in the mirage race. When he woke up, he realized that he was at the bottom of a valley, and the black metal rod was stabbed into the ground beside him. The moment this curse was formed, the corpse race was no longer supreme in the eyes of the demonic ape race members. They couldn't help but want to pounce toward the corpse race city, devour its flesh, and suck its marrow. He wanted to continue fighting, but the corpse god wasn't willing to fight him anymore, and he decisively left the territory of the soul-devouring beasts. Although he couldn't revive his clansmen on the spot, he could find the corpse god that had devoured his clansmen and use the boundless soul power in his ancient god's soul to rebuild his clansmen. That way, his clansmen would be reborn, but they wouldn't be a brand new clan. At this time, the venerable devilish ape was completely enlightened by the black metal rod. Under the venerable devilish ape's careful nurturing, the demonic ape race grew rapidly, and they became the strongest force in the first realm of the Tao of Hell. The most dangerous place was the safest place. Although there were threats everywhere in the soul-devouring beast's territory, the corpse race's several large-scale attacks were all stopped by the soul-devouring beasts, and the corpse race suffered heavy losses instead. A battle broke out, and the demonic ape race, which used to be submissive and lowly, followed the venerable devilish ape race and charged towards the corpse race. This was the power of the 6 paths of reincarnation, and no living being could interfere with it. Even the powerful ancient gods couldn't revive the dead living beings on the spot. The venerable devilish ape wasn't satisfied with this answer, because he didn't want to create a new clan. He wanted his original clansmen. With a sense of urgency, the venerable devilish ape cultivated diligently every day, absorbing knowledge from the black metal rod, and constantly tempering his body. However, even if the venerable devilish ape had the protection of the black metal rod, there was still a limit to his physical strength. Corpse God. The venerable devilish ape, who understood this point, finally led his clansmen to fight a bloody battle. They fought while retreating, and finally hid in the west of the second realm of the Tao of Hell, which was also the territory of the soul-devouring beast. The venerable devilish ape's curse was branded in the bloodline of all his clansmen, including himself. Therefore, this battle ended prematurely because of the fusion of the soul-devouring beast. While his consciousness was hazy, the heart of an expert in the venerable devilish ape's heart was catalyzed once again, and it grew. However, there was a taboo in the venerable devilish ape's heart. None of his clansmen were allowed to step into the cave where he buried his clansmen. It was the same every day, year after year of cultivation. Facing the corpse god's action of devouring his clansmen, the venerable devilish ape was powerless to resist. He could only watch helplessly as his clansmen were swallowed into the corpse god's mouth, and the rest were brutally killed. However, the corpse god's soul was nowhere to be found. Nevertheless, the days of cultivation in the future were no longer as boring as before. Staring at the space barrier, the venerable devilish ape made a decision. Afraid of the venerable devilish ape's revenge, they changed their name to the Mirage Tribe and lived in seclusion in this realm, becoming a clan of miners under the inconspicuous Nether Tribe. They had inherited the corpse god's divine seal's law, and their bloodline contained the divinity of the second realm's supreme race. They were destined to be extraordinary in the future. During this period, he had visited many large realms, found countless descendants of the corpse race, and cruelly sacrificed them. After leaving this place, he would wait for the right time to take revenge. The furious venerable devilish ape used his ancient god realm cultivation as a bargaining chip and swore an oath to the 6 paths of reincarnation, cursing the corpse race's descendants to fall into eternal oblivion. In this battle, the venerable devilish ape suppressed the corpse god in every aspect, forcing the latter into a dead end. Facing the demonic ape tribe led by the venerable devilish ape, the corpse race could be said to be helpless, and they even noticed the demonic ape tribe was growing stronger and stronger. In order to remind himself of this hatred and motivate himself at all times, the venerable devilish ape dug a cave in this desolate world and buried the corpses of several dozen clansmen who had not been devoured by the corpse god. He also forged an incomparably sturdy stone coffin for each of them. The greatest taboo in the Purgatory Tao's second realm was triggered. At that moment, the first to feel fear was not the venerable devilish ape, because he had already given up on life and death. Instead, it was the corpse god who had a bad premonition and chose to stop. Each battle was stronger than the last, and the venerable devilish ape seemed to be able to break through his limits every time he fought. From being unable to withstand a single blow at the beginning to being evenly matched later on, this process seemed long, but it was still too short for creatures like them who had extremely long lifespans. His cultivation speed was extremely rare in the netherworld. Ever since he had the idea of rebelling against the corpse race, the venerable devilish ape had always been researching how to fight against the corpse race. In the following days, the venerable devilish ape tempered his body with thunderstorms, tempered his willpower by swimming in lava, and trained his battle techniques in the terrifying death storms. At that moment, the venerable devilish ape understood that he had nothing else apart from this metal rod. However, this moment finally arrived 50 years later. His clansmen were all dead, and he was alone from then on. He had always been looking forward to the day he killed the corpse god and resurrected his clansmen. At that moment, the venerable devilish ape was extremely excited. He thought that after killing the corpse god, he would be able to see his deceased clansmen again and resolve his obsession. However, the venerable devilish ape knew that he would have to stay here for a very long time until he could take his revenge. Every time he ended his cultivation, the venerable devilish ape would stay in the cave and accompany these stone coffins. However, the venerable devilish ape chose to continue fighting without any hesitation. The demonic ape race grew little by little in this extremely harsh environment. Although his clansmen continued to grow stronger, the venerable devilish ape had his own worries. This was because the corpse god knew that if the soul-devouring beast was born during the fusion process, then the seal set up by the gods wouldn't be able to stop it. When that happened, the entire second realm would be plunged into misery and suffering, and the corpse race would suffer the most. Countless soul-devouring beasts gathered together and continued to fuse. The venerable devilish ape tried to create life. All of this was actually part of his plan, and hiding in the territory of the soul-devouring beasts in the west was a necessary path. In reality, the venerable devilish ape was also well aware of this. However, he knew that this wasn't due to his innate talent. Everything was bestowed upon him by the black metal rod that he viewed as a god. Although the corpse race had a deep foundation, it was slowly emptied under the venerable devilish ape's challenge. However, it wasn't easy to carry out this plan. Even so, the venerable devilish ape didn't give up after learning the method. He spent close to 1,000 years learning how to use the boundless soul power within the souls of ancient gods to reconstruct the souls of his clansmen. However, before he left, the corpse god swallowed most of his clansmen in front of the venerable devilish ape and cruelly killed the rest. Then, the corpse god pointed at the venerable devilish ape with a blood-stained hand and said, "This was the forbidden area of the second realm of the infernal realm. It was also a forbidden area for soul-type lifeforms. What made the corpse god even more uneasy was that the demonic ape race that the venerable devilish ape had created had enormous potential, so much so that it surpassed the corpse race. One had red skin, while the other had purple skin. It was a man and a woman. They fought fiercely, and their bodies were strong. Moreover, they would evolve after devouring the members of the corpse race. The venerable devilish ape had sent several batches of his clansmen away in advance and dispersed them to the outside world. Meanwhile, his soul had left a mark on the bodies of these fleeing clansmen. Once he died, his soul would instantly teleport into the bodies of these clansmen and lay dormant there. As they reproduced and lived, they would awaken at some point. He had indeed killed the corpse god. However, when he was about to absorb the corpse god's soul, he discovered that the corpse god's soul had turned into two soul orbs, one red and one purple, and disappeared in the blink of an eye. Although he had the ambition to be the strongest, the venerable devilish ape's feelings for his clansmen had never faded. This was because the strongest enemy had yet to return. The soul-devouring beast was completely enraged by their battle. During the battle, the venerable devilish ape discovered that the look down on the world seed in his body was constantly germinating and growing, causing his battle power to continuously increase. This battle lasted for close to 100,000 years. When the final battle started, the second realm of the infernal realm was filled with the smell of blood. His prayers were answered. He began to study the habits of the soul-devouring beast and planned a relatively safe area in the western region to help his clansmen get through the most difficult days. The first life form he created was the fire elemental spirit, an elemental life form. The venerable devilish ape began to carefully guide the growth of this new race and named them the devilish ape race. At the same time, he also placed a similar curse on this race. Although the venerable devilish ape sealed the potential of this race, an accident still occurred. After the battle ended, the venerable devilish ape found out that the corpse god had long known that he would face defeat, so he had left a way out for himself. Although he still hoped to see his original clansmen again, he didn't want to be alone anymore. However, before he left, the venerable devilish ape returned to his territory and stored the bodies of his clansmen who had been killed by the corpse god. He then brought them into the valley, crossed the realm barrier, and arrived at the first realm of the infernal realm. The weather here was extremely bad, but the venerable devilish ape didn't feel the slightest bit uncomfortable. Under the venerable devilish ape's curse seal, the corpse god would never be able to awaken again. His longing for his clansmen didn't fade with time. Instead, it deepened. The servility that had been suppressed for countless generations was completely released at this moment. The seed of power in the bottom of his heart gave him the determination to not be free, and it also ignited the boiling blood in his body. The moment he arrived in this world, the venerable devilish ape roared at the sky. His roar traveled over the mountains and echoed throughout this world. He issued a challenge to the corpse god on the other side. The venerable devilish ape had only heard of the corpse god's existence, but he had never seen him with his own eyes. Since your corpse race treats my clansmen as food, then my clansmen will definitely treat your corpse race as food in the future. Facing the corpse god, the venerable devilish ape knew that his chances of winning were extremely low, but he still chose to fight. One day, the venerable devilish ape couldn't bear the endless loneliness, and he prayed to the black metal rod for a way to revive his clansmen. The final battle between the venerable devilish ape and the corpse god had arrived. However, the venerable devilish ape had no choice. If he continued to fight, then his clan would cease to exist, and he would be the only one left alive. The venerable devilish ape was in a state of life and death throughout this battle. He hovered between life and death, and he kept breaking through the limits of his body to obtain greater power. After the corpse god returned and learned of the demonic ape race's rebellion, he stepped into the territory of the soul-devouring beasts alone and found the demonic ape race. The longest war in the history of the Tao of Hell's second realm had begun. Just like that, the knowledge in the venerable devilish ape's mind continued to grow, and his strength increased by leaps and bounds, nearing the threshold of the ancient god realm. At that moment, the venerable devilish ape finally couldn't hold on any longer, and he fell from the sky and fainted. After staying in this world for more than 30,000 years, the venerable devilish ape finally broke through to the ancient god realm. Tens of thousands of years passed, and that day finally arrived. However, he still didn't head to the second realm, because he knew that he wasn't strong enough to fight against the corpse god. This intermittent battle continued for another 100 years. At this time, the venerable devilish ape also discovered that there was a spatial barrier in the valley behind him, and it seemed to be able to lead to another world. Everything was because of his obsession with his clansmen, and he wanted to make the clan he created resemble his original clansmen as much as possible. However, the venerable devilish ape didn't doubt his strength at all. After officially becoming a god, he knew how terrifying an ancient god was, and it was definitely not something he could fight against. However, things didn't go as he wished. Other than the venerable devilish ape, the rest of the devil ape clan only had the courage to fight against the corpse race, but they didn't have the strength to back it up. Towards the end of the battle, the venerable devilish ape realized that his recovery was getting slower and slower, and his body was already on the verge of collapse. It seemed like he would die if he continued to fight like this. However, just when the venerable devilish ape thought that he would die from exhaustion, an accident happened. Time flew, and the venerable devilish ape's cultivation once again stepped into the ancient god realm. The devil ape clan also grew stronger day by day, and it became the strongest force in the western side of the second realm. At that moment, the venerable devilish ape's strength fell to the god realm, but this curse crossed many large realms and descended on the descendants of the corpse race. But just when the venerable devilish ape thought that there was no turning back, the black iron rod told him another way. As cries rang out in the Mirage Race's village, a new story began in the process of creation. The venerable devilish ape had the idea of creating a new clan for himself. He was the god in the hearts of the corpse race's people, a powerful being who had ruled the eastern side of the second realm for countless years. During this period, the corpse race never gave up on the idea of annihilating the devil ape clan, and they came to the western side several times. At the end of this period of history, a group of corpse race escaped to the Sunluo domain. It was too lonely to walk alone, and this was not what the venerable devilish ape wanted. Chapter 673. The past was like smoke, gradually dissipating. Staring at the two soul pearls hovering before him, venerable demonic ape couldn't help but feel excited. He had searched for them for a very long time, so long that he had forgotten how many years had passed. Many things had changed in the second realm. However, he had never abandoned his obsession, which was to resurrect his clansmen. At this moment, he knew that his clansmen were about to be resurrected. Although he had close to 10 million descendants, the only clansmen he recognized were the members of the demonic ape tribe who had been killed by the corpse goddess. The current demonic ape tribe was just a substitute. At the very least, he wouldn't feel so lonely. After taking a deep breath, venerable demonic ape gradually calmed down. He raised his hand and grabbed the two soul pearls. Then, he crushed the two soul pearls. Immediately, a vast wave of soul power swept out, and even venerable demonic ape couldn't help but take a step back. Fortunately, the two soul pearls exploded above the clouds, and the shock waves didn't spread below. Following which, venerable demonic ape closed his eyes and started to control the soul power to gather between his hands. Venerable demonic ape had practiced this step countless times in his mind. He had even created many races to practice this step. One could say that venerable demonic ape was very familiar with this step. As the soul power in the surroundings was absorbed into its hands, the venerable demonic ape suddenly opened its eyes and roared into the distance. His roar created sound waves that scattered the clouds and continuously radiated forward. In the blink of an eye, the sound waves resounded throughout the path of the Purgatory's second realm. They even passed through the barrier of the second realm and reached the path of the Purgatory's first realm. At this moment, in the path of the Purgatory's first realm, countless stone coffins in a collapsed cave suddenly trembled, as if in response to the earth-shattering roar. When the nearby players saw this scene, they were astonished. They couldn't understand what was happening. However, what happened next left them dumbfounded. Many players started to record the scene and even started live-streaming it on the forums. Countless stone coffins rose from the rubble, and a black glow flowed on the surface of the ancient stone coffins, following which they transformed into black arcs that flew into the sky. Holy sh*t. Everyone, look! The coffin is flying. 666. I remember digging these coffins out 2 years ago, but I gave up when I couldn't break them open. Now they're flying. Did someone trigger a hidden plot? Who did it? Can anyone come out and explain what happened? It's probably some son of AB*TCA. He probably did something that angered his ancestor. Now, he's going to punish his relative in the name of righteousness. Let's all disperse. Laughing emoji. There was a lot of discussion going on in the nearby live chat channel. They were all very curious and confused as they looked at the coffins that flew into the distance. After these stone coffins flew to the end of the first realm, they passed through the realm barrier and flew straight towards the area where the venerable demonic ape was. When all 68 coffins arrived, Venerable Devil Ape waved his hand and condensed the soul power in his hand into the 68 coffins. After that, he began to use the soul power to reconstruct the bodies and souls of his clansmen that had died a long time ago. The Venerable Devil Ape treasured the soul power very much. This was because soul power came from the soul. It was extremely rare even in the entire underworld. Even as an ancient god, he didn't have a source of soul power. As the bodies were being reconstructed, the 68 stone coffins began to tremble and slowly opened a gap. Suddenly, a thick black fog gushed out. The ancient demonic ape clan that had been sleeping for a long time was slowly awakening at this moment. Heaven realm, heavenly Tao realm. Immortal Qi lingered and endless spiritual power waves gathered to form a lake. In the center of this lake, there was a 3-meter-tall silkworm cocoon. As the dense immortal Qi gathered, the silkworm cocoon undulated as if it was breathing. At this moment, a golden mark suddenly appeared on the cocoon. Then, the cocoon bloomed like a lotus petal. In the center, a man in white with a golden Tai character carved on his forehead appeared. At this moment, he slowly opened his eyes. There was not a trace of emotion in his golden eyes, but they were filled with great majesty. Grand Elder, you're awake. As the voice sounded, a figure surrounded by prayer beads suddenly appeared beside him. I haven't recovered yet. I just found a chess piece that can be used. The Grand Elder turned to look at Dong Wang Tai and said indifferently, "Why didn't I know that you left a chess piece behind?" Dong Wang Tai was a little surprised. "It's just a coincidence. Back then, I was seriously injured in the battle with the 8 human ancestors. My Tai Ching rod disappeared, but I didn't expect it to fall into the nether realm. There's an ancient god there who believes in it." Hearing this, Dong Wang Tai's heart trembled. He even didn't dare to believe it. In order to infiltrate the top level of the nether realm, he had used many methods. However, the emperors of the nether realm would always resolve the open and secret struggles. Every time he infiltrated, he would be stuck at the god realm and couldn't go any deeper. But this time, the Grand Elder said that he had left an ancient god chess piece in the nether realm. How could he not be shocked? It's just a coincidence. There's nothing wrong with his soul and memory. So no matter how East Peak and the others investigate, it's useless. Because he's a part of the nether realm, but his belief is my Tai Ching rod. With this, I can make him do many things, and he will never disobey. The Grand Elder explained with an indifferent expression. Then what are you going to do next? Use this chess piece to start a war and exhaust the power of the Nether Realm as much as possible. When I wake up, I'll take down the Nether Realm in one fell swoop." At this point, a trace of emotion finally appeared in the Grand Elder's eyes. Dong Wangtai was silent for a while. Then he said, "Have you ever considered the return of annihilation? Tai, we've already done so much. Do you still care about this? Even if you stop now, you'll still die when annihilation returns. There's no difference." Dong Wangtai nodded silently and didn't say anything else. At this time, the Grand Elder suddenly asked, "Has the Heavenly Father given any feedback recently?" "There's only one thought. Wipe out all living beings in the human realm and the Nether Realm. He's our creator. I'll always carry out his decisions. But I really want to know why the Heavenly Father is doing this." "You ask me, but how can I know? The cause of the War of the Three Realms was instigated by the Heavenly Father. You and I are just the executors." With that, Dong Wangtai sighed. The Grand Elder didn't say anything else. Just as he was about to continue his seclusion to heal himself, a dazzling ball of light as bright as the sun suddenly bloomed above his head. Seeing this ball of light, the Grand Elder and Dong Wangtai's expressions changed. They immediately bowed to the ball of light. "Heavenly Father, do you want to know the reason?" The ball of light didn't say anything, but its voice suddenly appeared in the minds of Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder. Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder seemed a little hesitant when they heard it. "You're all my children. Your power is bestowed by me. I don't need to hide it from you. I'll let you see the whole story." As the voice sounded in their minds, Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder suddenly realized that the scenes around them began to rapidly rewind, as if time was rewinding. In the blink of an eye, the heavenly realm they were in changed from a fairyland to a desolate land. It was like the surface of a deserted planet without a trace of life. "Don't doubt it. This is the original Three Realms." The old voice sounded again. "Heavenly Father, since this is the Three Realms, why isn't there a trace of spiritual chi or the power of laws?" The Grand Elder asked indifferently. "Because the Three Realms never had any spiritual chi, let alone the power of laws. It was originally just a barren land." "Then why?" The Grand Elder was about to continue asking when he suddenly frowned, because he realized that something was wrong with his surroundings. Although there was no power of laws around, there were countless things that seemed purer than the power of laws. As he had never come into contact with them, he didn't know what they were exactly. "This is the holy spiritual force. It's different from spiritual chi and laws. It's the most fundamental power that builds the entire outer realm. And the original state of this world is built from 1,000,000 strands of holy spiritual force." At this moment, Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder were very surprised. At the same time, they didn't understand why the Heavenly Father would bring them to the moment before the Three Realms were built. "Keep watching, you'll know." As the voice faded, time began to move forward. They didn't know how much time had passed. It could have been 1,000,000 years, or it could have been hundreds of millions of years, but their surroundings didn't change at all. The world didn't evolve into the embryonic form of the Three Realms as Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder had imagined either. Just as they were confused, the world suddenly trembled, and countless figures appeared out of thin air. Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder immediately looked at the figures, only to find that they were blurry. They couldn't see their faces at all. "There's no need to look. They don't seem to belong to this space and time. Even I can't see their faces clearly." The Heavenly Father's voice rang out, dispelling Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder's thoughts. Next, they began to quietly observe the blurry figures, wanting to know what they were going to do. Time passed again. They didn't know how much time had passed. The figure in the lead kept shuttling back and forth in the world, as if he was investigating it. In the end, he suddenly stopped at the center of the world. What happened next shocked Dong Wangtai and the Grand Elder. Because the figure was actually creating a world. as a dark red book appeared, countless power of laws surged out, rushing to every corner of the world. At that moment, the figures behind him began to help him construct this world. Gradually, the world was divided into 3 layers, and the initial form of the 3 realms was revealed. Next, the figure in the lead charged towards the middle layer and began to carefully construct this world. Time passed quickly, and as he created, the world began to give birth to new species. However, all new species would quickly die the moment they were born. After being born and destroyed several times, the figure stopped creating, standing where he was as if thinking about why he couldn't create life. Gradually, he seemed to understand why life could not exist in the middle layer. At that moment, he went to the bottommost layer and began to create new life. This time, he succeeded. A black orb of light was slowly born in this world. Seeing this, the figure seemed to be extremely happy. He continuously stroked the black orb of light, then brought it to the top layer and created a similar-looking golden orb of light. Looking at the golden orb of light, Dongwang Tai and the Grand Elder were extremely shocked. They could not help but ask, "Heavenly Father, you were created by this figure?" "That's right, I am the Heavenly Tao, and the 6 paths were born with me." Hearing this, Dongwang Tai and the Grand Elder continued to observe the figure in disbelief. Soon, they understood why the Heavenly Father had always hated the other 2 realms. As they were formed, the 3 realms underwent great changes. The Heavenly Tao and the 6 paths took the initiative to absorb outer spiritual qi to replenish the 3 realms. Gradually, the middle layer gained life and was no longer so desolate. All of this was seen by that figure. But soon, the world changed. The 2 orbs of light that had absorbed outer spiritual qi suddenly began to wither, as if they could no longer withstand the absorption of outer spiritual qi. Seeing this, the figure became extremely anxious. He brought the 2 orbs of light to the middle layer and began to repair their withered bodies. Time passed quickly again. Not only were the Heavenly Tao and the 6 paths not repaired by the figure, they instead withered day by day. Seeing this, the figure in the lead gathered all the figures in this world and began to discuss countermeasures. Dongwang Tai and the Grand Elder could only vaguely hear the words, Holy Spirit energy, and so on. They were unable to clearly understand what was being said. In the end, the figure in the lead ordered his subordinates to collect all the wandering Holy Spirit energy in this world. The 1,000,000 portions of Holy Spirit energy that filled this world were quickly collected by the figures and brought to the figure in the lead. With 1,000,000 portions of Holy Spirit energy in hand, the figure began to reforge the Heavenly Tao and the 6 paths so that they could merge perfectly with the world and no longer repel each other. Suddenly, Dongwang Tai and the Grand Elder heard the figure's voice as he distributed the Holy Spirit energy. 1 portion for the Heavenly Tao, 2 portions for the little guy, 1 portion for the Heavenly Tao, 3 portions for the little guy, 1 portion for the Heavenly Tao, 5 portions for the little guy, 1 portion for the Heavenly Tao, 10 portions for the little guy. The 1,000,000 portions of Holy Spirit energy that filled the 3 realms were quickly distributed. This was a completely unfair distribution. There was no balance to speak of. It was completely one-sided bias. The Creator's unfairness is the reason why I started this war. Even if he didn't create the 3 realms, the 6 paths and I would still be born over time. When that time comes, we would get half of the Holy Spirit energy. Each of us would get 500,000 portions, but because of his bias, I've always been inferior to the 6 paths. That's why I want to take back everything that belongs to me. Dongwang Tai and the Grand Elder felt an indescribable anger from the Heavenly Tao's calm voice. While feeling shocked, the Grand Elder asked the question in his mind. Heavenly Father, who is this Creator? What's his purpose in creating this world? He's Butcher. Dongwang Tai and the Grand Elder were stunned when they heard that. Although they knew that the strongest person in the 3 realms was Butcher, They never thought that he was the one who created the three realms and was their heavenly Father's creator. Don't worry. He won't be coming back. The future belongs to the heavens and you. The voice slowly faded away. Divine Qi swirled around them once again, and they returned to their original state of heavenly Tao. The ball of light above Dong Wang Tai and the Grand Elder also disappeared. Dong Wang Tai and the Grand Elder were left in a state of shock and confusion. Chapter 674. Baiki, the Mansion of the Dead. As the number of players entering the Naraka realm increased, so did the strategies. At this time, most of the players had a simple idea. They had to be the first to eat crabs, therefore they set off decisively according to the strategy. However, what they didn't know was that what greeted them was a tragic beginning. Since most of the soul-devouring beasts distributed in the west of the second region of the Naraka realm had never seen the players before, they were very curious the moment they saw them. They wanted to know if the souls of these creatures were tasty. Therefore, the first batch of players who arrived at the second region of the Naraka realm were miserable. It was not a problem to cross this region and move forward, but they would definitely be swallowed by the soul-devouring beasts along the way. Then, they would be spat out after being identified as inferior food. However, under the pioneering efforts of the first batch of players, the soul-devouring beasts gradually realized that the players were inedible. After that, they would no longer approach the players when they saw the same soul power fluctuation. It could be said that the efforts of this batch of players had made the lives of the latecomers much more comfortable. Relying on the abilities of the soul-devouring beasts, the players used the strategy learned from the strategy to lure the demonic apes into the territory of the soul-devouring beasts with the corpses of the corpse clan members. All they had to do next was to wait and then pick up the materials from the demonic ape. As the materials produced by the demonic apes increased day by day, the income of lifestyle professions such as blacksmiths also increased. Every day, lifestyle players would receive a large number of requests to forge equipment or special tools. As more and more equipment above level 200 was produced, the overall strength of the players began to rise rapidly. Everything was developing in a good direction. This made Lu Wu, who sat behind the scenes and learned the knowledge of creation from Bailey, feel very gratified. He always felt that the future was full of hope. As the Calamity Army gradually took shape, they would definitely be able to fight against the heavenly realm. The Netherworld, the Devouring Sea. An island formed by white bones was floating in the center of the sea. Looking down from above, one could see that this white bone island was actually built by the bones of a dead creature. It was obvious that this creature's body was huge when it was alive. There were several ports around the island with many ships coming and going. The interior of the island was very prosperous. There were many shops stocked with a large number of spiritual materials and treasures. People came and went to trade, and it was very lively. At this time, in the center of the island, inside a giant tower that was more than 100 meters tall, countless figures in black robes gathered around a blue formation, holding a meeting. Elder Ing, you're in charge of this matter, explain it to everyone. At that moment, the woman standing at the head of the table suddenly turned her head to look at Elder Ing and said. From the dim blue glow of the array, it could be seen indistinctly that although the woman had the upper body of a human, the lower part of her body was that of a snake. At that moment, her eyes that were flashing with a scarlet glow stared straight at Elder Ing as she questioned him. When Elder Ing heard that, he nodded and immediately opened his mouth to say, regarding the player clan, I decided to investigate it as a precaution. After that, Elder Hua entrusted the Illusion Fish clan to go to Baiki to investigate. However, the problem now is that the Illusion Fish clan has moved away from the Devouring Sea, and they are heading towards Baiki, where the player clan is located. In other words, the Illusion Fish clan has surrendered to the player clan. As he spoke, Elder Ing paused and swept his gaze across the people present before continuing. Although I don't know the reason, one thing is clear. The Illusion Fish clan actually dared to take the risk of offending the Underworld Chamber of Commerce to surrender to the Player clan. From the perspective of the Illusion Fish clan, it is obvious that they think that the Player clan is capable of contending against the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. Therefore, this time, I suggest that we continue to observe and investigate the Player clan's background before taking action. Elder Ing, forgive me for not agreeing with your suggestion this time. It is not the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's style to be cautious over and over again. It is not the first time that the Player clan has robbed our merchant ship. If we continue to tolerate it, what would the other sea merchants under our protection think of us? Therefore, I feel that we must strike with lightning speed and annihilate the Player clan. At that moment, a burly man sitting opposite to Elder Ing suddenly spoke up. Seconded. Seconded. After the man finished speaking, most of the people present in the meeting shouted in agreement. After that, everyone fell silent and turned to look at the woman standing at the head of the table. The woman did not speak. The corners of her mouth slowly curled up, revealing a charming smile. Elder Ing, I actually have something that I'm very confused about. Can you answer it for me? Elder Ing was puzzled, but he still spoke decisively. Guild leader, please speak. Actually, we have known each other for a very long time. But recently, you have been a little unfamiliar to me. As she spoke, the woman's scarlet eyes focused on Elder Ing. Why do you say that? In my impression, you have always been a decisive person. It is precisely because of this that I established the War Chamber of Commerce and let you manage the various external affairs. And you have not been disappointed. You have always been able to handle the external affairs in the shortest time possible. Although I do not have a detailed understanding, I know that the rebellion on East Spring Island and the Sea of Storms incident all ended under your swift and decisive suppression. At this point, the woman took a deep look at Elder Ing and continued to speak. But only this time, your way of doing things has become very strange. It is completely different from before. If the words of caution came from the mouth of the Black Elder, I would think it is very normal. But this time, when the Black Elder said to take the initiative to attack, you advised us to be cautious. So I am very puzzled. I really want to know what your true thoughts are. You suspect me. Elder Ying's hoarse voice came from his mouth. When the woman heard that, the black robe on the surface of her body fell off, revealing her enchanting snake body. Her lower body that was covered in red scales suddenly curled towards Elder Ing, but stopped abruptly at Elder Ying's forehead, and then slowly retracted. Why? I suspect that you have already taken action. We have worked together for so many years, and I trust you very much. But I trust you, and I hope that you can also trust me. Tell me the reason. At that moment, Elder Ying's heart was tense. He did not expect that this time, to clear the name of the Player clan and the Sea King, would put himself in such a predicament. His mind was working at full speed, and Elder Ing began to think of a way to deal with it. At that moment, he also realized that what he was doing now was extremely different from the way he did things in the past. Back then, in order to bring down the Underworld Merchant Guild, he had always been swift and decisive in dealing with the outside world. He would personally carry out all the actions that could lead to war against the outside world. However, in the eyes of the higher-ups of the Underworld Merchant Guild, his actions had always been like this. This was also the reason why he was able to rise so quickly in the Underworld Merchant Guild. His decisiveness in killing had always been the label that others had for him. However, this time, the people involved were unable to see clearly. Elder Ing completely did not consider whether his change was too great. As he held a high position in the Underworld Merchant Guild and was the #1 person under the president, no one had mentioned this to him. Now that the president had personally pointed it out, he had already realized that the situation was not good. In the silence, everyone present was waiting for Elder Ying's answer. After a moment, Elder Ing suddenly said, "There's nothing much to explain. This is just my opinion after I carefully understood the situation of the player clan. Their appearance was too strange. In such a short period of time, they swept across the empty void and the Kuelong Ocean. They are definitely not the opponents that we encountered previously. So, I feel that we need to be cautious. However, if all of you have doubts, I have nothing to say. Hearing this, everyone was silent. They subconsciously turned their heads to look at the woman, waiting for her decision. Elder Ing, I'm not very satisfied with your answer. The woman's eyes were glowing red, revealing a dangerous glint. This is my answer. If you're not satisfied, you'll give me the same answer. Elder Ing suddenly said angrily. Seeing that Elder Ing dared to speak to the president in such a manner, everyone present had a bad feeling. However, to their surprise, the woman suddenly burst into laughter. This is the Elder Ing that I know. This is the temper that you should have. So, I'll give you a chance to prove your innocence. Bring along the 10 major war merchant guilds that you control and destroy the player clan. Hearing that, Elder Ing had a bad feeling in his heart. At this moment, he realized that the player clan was probably going to be destroyed. Initially, he thought that the player clan might be able to support the Sea King's growth until the Sea King completely inherited the Shadow Legion. However, the situation had changed too quickly, leaving him no time to plan his next step. Elder Ing, do you dare? At this moment, the woman suddenly said, Why not? I've always been in charge of the external wars of the devouring underworld branch. This time, the war against the player clan will also be initiated by me. Elder Ing bit the bullet and agreed immediately. All right, I hereby congratulate Elder Ing on your victorious return, the woman said with a smile. Congratulations on your victorious return, Elder Ing. Hearing the president's words, everyone present immediately chimed in. At this moment, Elder Ing snorted coldly and his figure slowly disappeared from the spot. As he walked out of the giant tower and walked towards the shore, Elder Ing felt a sense of helplessness. Destroying the player clan was not his wish, but at this moment, he knew that he had no choice but to do so. However, before that, he felt that it was better to inform the Sea King in advance. Chapter 675. Kuelong Ocean, Xinmo Island. As usual, the Sea King was wearing a long robe and inspecting the construction of the island. The Sea King was very satisfied with the development of the island. Relying on the knowledge stored in the Shadow King's inheritance, the Mu-Te army's strength grew steadily. What the Sea King needed now was a stable development. He believed that if this continued, the Mu-Te army would soon become the leader of the top 10 war chambers of commerce and embark on the path to the center of the Netherworld Ocean. Finally, he would find a way to replace the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. The Sea King nodded in satisfaction as he looked at the craftsmen who were building new high-end warships by the sea. However, just as he was about to leave for the next location, his expression froze and he looked up at the horizon. In the distance, a giant golden bird swooped down from a high altitude. Its target was Xinmo Island. The Sea King was familiar with this giant bird and knew that a mission from the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce had arrived. The Sea King was not surprised. After all, it was under the name of the War Chamber of Commerce. It was normal for a mission to arrive. At this moment, the giant bird arrived above his head and dropped a letter before flapping its wings and flying away. The Sea King waved at the letter on the ground, and the letter flew into his hand. With a calm mind, he opened the letter and started reading the content. However, after a cursory glance, the Sea King's expression suddenly turned extremely ugly. Gathering the top 10 war chambers of commerce to annihilate the player clan? Is this for real? The Sea King was dumbfounded. It was a crucial period for him to develop his forces, and what he wanted the most was peace. However, he was told that he was going to war with the player clan now. What the F***CK? Looking at the content of the letter, the Sea King cursed in his heart. His good mood was completely ruined. In fact, he knew that this moment would come sooner or later. After all, the player clan was too arrogant. They were practically jumping around in front of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce with arrogant provocation. It was already incredible that the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce could tolerate them until now. However, the Sea King was still extremely distressed when faced with such a situation. Going to war with the player clan. If it was 2 years ago, he would definitely be in favor of it. They should King kill these bastards who were not afraid of death and send them to the 6 realms of reincarnation. However, the Sea King felt that if they really fought, he might be the first to be sent to the 6 realms of reincarnation. He wasn't sure if the player clan could fight against the powerful underworld merchant guild, but as the vanguard of the player clan and the player clan, they would definitely meet a tragic end. They were basically no different from cannon fodder. The Netherworld Trade Association might not understand the player clan, but how could he not? That group of lunatics loved it when their enemies hated them to the core, yet they could not do anything to them. The Sea King knew this very well. Fighting with them was a double blow on the physical and mental level. However, he could not disobey the orders of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. At this moment, he knew that he had to make a choice. He could no longer benefit from both sides. He had to choose a side. Looking at the letter in his hand, the Sea King turned his head to look at the blue ocean in melancholy. He sighed in his heart. "Didn't you say that you would let me develop slowly? Didn't you say that my future would be bright? King Underworld Merchant Guild, King Player Clan, I'm very annoyed right now. You're the only ones who have so much to do on the player's side." The ambushing of the demonic ape tribe had reached the point where the demonic ape tribe was furious. Due to the existence of the bloodline curse, the demonic ape tribe could not resist the temptation of the player clan's corpses. Even if they knew that it was a trap, they still chased after them with bloodshot eyes. However, what welcomed them was the soul-devouring beasts trap set by the players. At the same time, the soul-devouring beasts had also discovered this characteristic of the player clan. These soul-devouring beasts had gradually learned to cooperate with the player clan in concealment. Then, they would wait for the player clan to lure the demonic ape tribe over before they made their move. This was a pleasant surprise to the players. Therefore, the players began to work together with the soul-devouring beasts to gain mutual benefit. They worked together and conspired to trick the demonic ape tribe into their trap. Such a large-scale operation naturally attracted the attention of the demonic ape tribe. However, they were helpless against the soul-devouring beasts in the west. They could only convey the news to the honorable demonic ape. After the honorable demonic ape received the news, he immediately began to investigate the player clan. Starting from the path that the players took, he quickly found out that the player clan had crossed the barrier of the first precinct. The honorable demonic ape was very familiar with the first precinct because it used to be his territory. He had lived there for a long time and many species were created by him. However, he had never seen these new species, the player clan. He also did not think that these creatures were naturally evolved from the creatures he created in the first precinct because he was extremely familiar with the species he created. He knew how they evolved like the back of his hand and would never mistake them. Thus, he began to investigate further and discovered the root of the problem. These creatures had actually come to the first precinct through the space tunnel. The direction of the space tunnel's fluctuation was in Bakey. After investigating this, the honorable demonic ape's line of sight penetrated through the layers of space and arrived at Bakey. He immediately discovered the huge group of creatures that lived there, the player clan. This clan was the force that was causing trouble in the second precinct of the Hell Path. After thoroughly investigating the reason, the honorable demonic ape revealed a cruel smile. "Since they dared to offend me, then there's no need for this clan to exist anymore. They shall become the children's food." The lives of the players went on as usual. However, something unexpected happened on this day. The Sea King's subordinate, Haysway, came to the Liuli coast and informed them of something. The 10 great war chambers of commerce of the devouring sea were gathering and getting ready for battle. At the same time, He Sui informed the players that the Sea King wanted them to evacuate as soon as possible and hide in other regions. They would only return after the storm had passed. Although the players did not reply to He Sui, they were filled with disdain. A bunch of experience and soul coins are on their way. Why should we run? It was a surprise that the Underworld Chamber of Commerce wanted to attack them. Although they were definitely no match for them, it was never a problem for the players to defeat the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. The key was whether they could kill their opponents and obtain soul coins and experience. Therefore, it was impossible to run. They had to fight to the end. However, the players were still very concerned about this matter, and they immediately made preparations. As the posts about the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's impending attack appeared in the forum, the players who were searching for treasures in the outer sea, earning money in the Instance Dungeon, and exploring other regions all rushed to the Mansion of the Dead. The players quickly made preparations for this battle. The health recovery potions, enhancement potions, and the self-made attack items from the auction house were quickly swept away. The atmosphere of war gradually intensified. When it came to war, the players were no longer the newbies who were scared silly by the grand scenes when they first entered the war. Most of the players were now battle-hardened. They only had a thirst for war because it could bring them great benefits. In order to maximize the benefits of war, Lu Wu even created the war honor system. The emergence of this war system made the players' benefits in war more standardized and not as messy as before. For example, during a war, there were 5,000 people in a group. However, the distribution of benefits during the war was very troublesome and could even lead to dispute. For example, the warrior players who were at the forefront would be trapped in the most intense area of the war. They would most likely be the first batch of players to die. Their early deaths would mean that the subsequent soul coins and experience would disappear. In comparison, the mage players would hide behind and attack while harvesting the enemy's lives. Not only was the level of danger much lower, but they would also be the party who would benefit the most. This caused the warrior players to feel very dissatisfied during the war. They felt that they had put in a lot of effort, but in the end they would gain the least. It was a thankless and unfair task. However, the war honor system was a good solution to this distribution problem. The war honor system that Lu Wu created divided the benefits into 2 categories: the total amount of soul coins obtained after the war and the total amount of experience obtained by the entire group after the war. These were also the 2 main categories of benefits for the players in war. The function of the war honor system was to collect and store all the players' benefits and not distribute them for the time being. After a war, the players would exchange their contributions for rewards from the team interest pool, including soul coins and EXP. The specific war contributions were divided into 6 categories by Lu Wu. Current war campaign. Personal output, damage received, auxiliary healing, number of enemies killed, number of bosses killed, special category. Each category corresponded to a type of player. This way, the distribution problem would be solved easily. Even if a player fought with his life and was accidentally killed, his benefits would not stop. This was because the members of the group would continue to fight and expand the benefits in the pool of benefit. When the time came, the player who died would be able to exchange his contribution for soul coins and experience points in the pool of benefits as long as he went online. In this way, it would not matter even if the warrior player died in battle. As long as he achieved a fixed amount of contribution points, he could exchange his contribution for rewards. Apart from these 6 categories, there was also a death bonus to evaluate the player's contributions. This was to see if the value of a player's death was great, and then the points would be given. Lu Wu let the artifact examine all of this, and the artifact would then give out the points based on the contribution points. In other words, as long as the players in a group activated the war honor system during the war, the benefits, soul coins, experience points, obtained from killing enemies in the group would be stored in the pool of benefit. The contributions of the players during the war would be converted into honor points. At the end of the war, the points of the whole group would be combined to obtain a percentage of individual benefit. Then, the corresponding rewards would be drawn from the pool of benefit. Under such circumstances, the more effort one put in, the higher the contribution points one would get, and the greater the benefits one would obtain at the end of the war. Moreover, the war honor system that Lu Wu had set up was bound to the artifact. Under its detection, the calculation of the contribution points would not be a problem. The benefits of a group would be very fair, which would increase the enthusiasm of the players. At the same time, the extra benefits obtained during the war would not be included in the overall pool of benefit. For example, when a player accidentally picked up precious spiritual materials or high-quality weapons during the war, these war items obtained by luck would be classified as items of personal benefits and would not be included in the overall pool of benefit. This would also bring about many changes and surprises in the war. However, the existence of the war honor system would allow the players who put in the effort to reap their rewards. The players who were most happy with the appearance of this system were the warriors and assassins. As the party who put in more effort than they gained, they often felt that the mage players who stayed at the rear to deal damage were simply the sons of the battle officials. They reaped many benefits and did not die easily. However, with the appearance of the war honor system, they knew that their efforts in the future would be rewarded. Of course, all of this was free. The activation of the war honor system would be prompted when the group had more than 5,000 members. Then, the players would vote to decide. This was the freedom that Lu Wu had given them. Chapter 676. Are all of you aware of the mission this time? I'm afraid I'll have to watch the entire battle. How awesome! On the other hand, the European server players once again keenly sensed that the original server was up to something. Their thoughts were simple. The original server wanted to monopolize everything. Bah, no way. Children, go ahead and devour. Those creatures that you hate will become your food. He could not tell if Elder Ing was bluffing him or if he really knew the truth. However, he dared not take the risk at this moment. Elder Ing listened and nodded silently. His gaze swept across the crowd and stopped at the Sea King. After the 9 major chambers of commerce finished distributing the tasks, Elder Ing turned to look at the Sea King. Elder Ing naturally did not know what the Sea King was thinking. He smiled and nodded, then said, "Don't think too much. It's enough that you understand what I mean. Perform well and no one will know your secret. Your collusion with the player clan will also disappear with the destruction of the player clan. Develop well in the Underworld Chamber of Commerce in the future. I have high hopes for you." Looking at the grave expression on the Sea King's face, Elder Ing patted him on the shoulder and immediately disappeared from where he stood. As for whether the player clan would escape to the Sea King was not worried at all. Following the announcement of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's gathering order, battleships arrived one after another in the Kuelong Ocean. Then, he walked toward the island while cursing in his heart. The distribution of tasks during the battle was not a trivial matter for the war chambers of commerce. "Old man, you bastard! You are the one who suggested to wipe out the player clan? You old fart, don't mess with the player clan even if you have nothing better to do. How dare you drag me into this? I curse you for giving birth to a son without an asshole. The distribution of tasks is complete. Go ahead and inform everyone to gather here in 4 hours and depart for Beiki," Elder Ing said. He had to admit that the Sea King's growth had completely exceeded his expectations. Therefore, he had high hopes for the Sea King. "Elder Ing, don't misunderstand. I only have hatred for the player clan. How could I collude with them?" However, the Sea King was unaware of all this. When he saw Elder Ing looking at him, he immediately nodded to show his respect. "Such a good task. Old man, you are too biased. But I like it. Hence, he decisively began to gather his men. After Elder Ing came closer, the people in charge of the various war chambers of commerce immediately opened their mouths to speak respectfully. Sea King, you've just joined the war chamber of commerce, so your strength is relatively weak. You'll be responsible for the blockade at the back of the sea. Don't let the player clan escape from the void ocean. The idea of overthrowing the underworld merchant guild and replacing it was born from his conversation with this old man. However, when they thought about how the Sea King could watch from the back while they had to fight head-on with the War Chamber of Commerce, they were extremely dissatisfied and could only glare angrily at the Sea King. Upon hearing this, the Sea King, who was initially very nervous, was confused. At that moment, he was seriously suspecting that this old man was secretly plotting something. He had already noticed that there seemed to be a problem with this Elder Ing. Responsible for sealing off the sea? So there was no need to fight? After Elder Ing left, the Sea King was dumbfounded. After all, they had nothing to do with each other before. There must be a conspiracy behind the sudden care. The venerable demonic ape's voice resounded throughout the Purgatory Realm's second realm. Sea King, do you know why I gave you this mission? The Sea King's heart trembled. Could it be that I'm too weak? Underworld, Kuelong Ocean. The Sea King turned a blind eye to the gazes around him. With a solemn expression, he looked as if he was about to shoulder a heavy responsibility. This made the people in charge of the War Chamber of Commerce gnash their teeth. Elder Ing nodded and continued to speak. Now, the Sea King had become his biggest expectation. Everyone immediately responded and then dispersed. Doesn't this mean that I can just watch this bunch of idiots charge and fight the player clan to the death? In fact, he was cursing in his heart. At the same time, Elder Ing, who was the core figure of this battle, also arrived at Exhilarating Island. At that moment, Elder Ing suddenly called out to the Sea King. The Sea King immediately stopped and turned to look at Elder Ing with a puzzled expression. Don't bother explaining. I just want you to understand that in such a situation, you have to make a choice. If you can't steel your heart to make a decision, then you will be dragged into an irrecoverable situation. You are a smart person. You should know that this is the time to give up certain interests and relationships. Elder Ing did not speak until the people in charge of the War Chamber of Commerce had left. At the same time, in the second precinct of the Naraka realm, a space teleportation formation was slowly forming. Understood, I promise to complete the mission. The Sea King immediately replied with a solemn expression, but in fact, he was grinning from ear to ear. Then, countless demonic apes gathered in the direction of the teleportation formation from all directions. Since he had inherited the Shadow King's inheritance, it meant that he had accepted the mission of overthrowing the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. The Sea King would definitely embark on this path of slaughter in the future. After receiving the notice, the War Chamber of Commerce decisively set off to the Kuelong Ocean and gathered near Exhilarating Island according to the instructions. The player clan ran away? That was the biggest joke in the world. They would not stop until the entire clan was annihilated. Hence, running away did not exist for the player clan at all. Understood! Everyone immediately responded. After stepping on the coast, Elder Ing looked up and saw the Sea King and the other people in charge of the War Chamber of Commerce standing nearby, waiting for him. Back then, he had come up with many plans to help the Sea King obtain the Shadow King's inheritance. However, he did not expect that there would be so many accidents along the way. The Sea King did not even need his help to brew the soul-praying fluid and easily obtained the Shadow King's inheritance. Elder Ing had a whole new level of respect for the Sea King. Upon hearing this, the Sea King felt that the old man must have some ulterior motives for being so nice to him. Next, let me assign the tasks for each of you in this operation to wipe out the player clan. Does Elder Ing mean that I should abandon the player clan? But why did he give me such a chance instead of destroying my Mu-Te Empire directly? If they were assigned to fight head-on, they would have to bear the greatest losses. Naturally, they hoped that their forces would be assigned to the easiest place. Upon hearing the assignment, the other people in charge of the War Chamber of Commerce glared at the Sea King furiously. The Sea King did not answer, but his heart was filled with doubts. Since Elder Ing controlled the quota of the War Chamber of Commerce, he could replace them anytime he was dissatisfied with them. Hence, they could only agree to the assignment. Upon hearing this, everyone's heart tightened. First, the Bloodstained Fleet, the Black Sea Fleet, the Sword Crown Fleet, and the Purple Bend Fleet. You will be in charge of attacking Baki from the front. The Smoke Dragon Fleet will be in charge of blocking the left side of the sea and attacking from the land. The Dragon Horn Chamber of Commerce will be in charge of blocking the right side of the sea and attacking from the land. Bullsh *T. It's because I know that you are in cahoots with the Player Clan. If any member of the Player Clan escapes, you will be severely punished. Do you understand, Sea King? Elder Ing said in a deep voice with a straight face. Upon hearing this, the Sea King's face turned pale. 4 hours later, the War Chamber of Commerce of the Devouring Sea Division had assembled outside of Xin-Mo Island. Then, under Elder Ying's command, they set off for Baki in a grandiose manner. Thinking of this, the Sea King looked at himself. His expression gradually became strange, and he could not help but shiver. As soon as he finished speaking, a portal suddenly appeared above the formation. Regarding Elder Ying's assignment, they dared not voice their anger. Elder Ing. Chapter 677. Ever since the Battle Royale where Jin Yao was killed, the European server players gradually realized one thing. The original players always seemed to encounter good opportunities and use them to quickly improve the combat power of their own players. At that time, some players had raised this issue on the European server forum and expressed their opinions. However, not many players cared about what he said at that time. However, after the battle for supremacy in the Kuelong Ocean and the subsequent war in the Sunluo domain, the European server players had generally accepted this matter. It was impossible for the European server players not to be jealous of this. However, they did not think too much about it. They just attributed this opportunity to Baki's unique geographical location, which could easily produce such opportunities for development. It was not a special arrangement by the officials. The reason for this was simple. Just like the original players, the European server players knew that the officials would not interfere with the development of the game world. The arrival of opportunities was also related to the development of the self-operating world. It was not a special arrangement by the officials. In fact, Lu Wu did not interfere in any of Baki's battles with the outside world. The battles with Cha Na, the Sea King, the Nine Luminaries, and other local forces were all situations that the players encountered in their own development. Lu Wu did not expect to form a relationship with the Sea King, a great enemy. Moreover, the European server players felt that compared to Naraka, their growth environment was already very comfortable. Although it was not as good as the original server, it was more than enough. However, the European server players also began to think of countermeasures for the rapid development of the original server. They tried to catch up with the development progress of the original server as soon as possible. Hence, they came up with a set of methods to freeload the original server's experience and soul coins. That was to always pay attention to the original server's situation. If they sensed that there was something to be gained, they would freeload it and not let the original server monopolize it. This really gave the European server players a taste of sweetness. After a few rounds of battles, they earned a lot of money. The entire server's combat power was greatly improved as a result, and they also obtained a large number of spiritual materials and other resources. This time, the European server players who were lurking in the original server forum to inquire about the news immediately sent the news back to the European server forum when they found out that the original players had begun to gather for war. Hence, a large number of European server lurkers came and began to investigate the specific information. Soon, they understood the whole story. It turned out that the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's army was about to attack Bakey. In this regard, they made a decisive decision and immediately began to prepare for war, sending out recruitment posters. Soon, a large number of European server players responded to the call. Most of the European server players did not want to miss out on such a lucrative war. Soon, the European server's army assembled and advanced toward Bakey. On the other side, the fleet of the 10 major war chambers of commerce had sailed into the void ocean. With regards to this battle, Elder Ing had already made up his mind to completely wipe out the player clan after understanding that he could not change anything. Initially, he wanted the player clan to assist the Sea King in his growth. However, at this moment, he would only be putting himself in danger if he tried to exonerate the player clan. This was the choice he had made with the Sea King. At this time, the only thing he could do was to destroy the player clan with lightning speed and prove that he had nothing to do with them. As the fleet gradually steered towards the Liuli coast, the corners of Elder Ying's mouth curled up into a cruel smile. As long as the Sea King was still around, the plan to revive the Shadow Clan could continue. The existence of the player clan was just a decoration. After another period of sailing, when their warship stepped into the waters of the Liuli coast, Elder Ing raised his head to look in the direction of the coast and then opened his mouth to say in a deep voice, "Begin!" As soon as Elder Ying's voice fell, the people in charge of the war chambers of commerce on the 10 leading warships each took out a scroll and began chanting. 10 Neptune's pardon were activated at the same time. Instantly, huge waves rose in front of the fleet. Countless water elemental giants gathered and moved towards the coast. At this time, the players were already prepared. When they saw the arrival of the war chambers of commerce, they immediately responded. Countless magic turrets were constructed and began to fire spells. In an instant, the sky was covered by spells of various colors. Spell trajectories were drawn out as they fell towards the direction of the fleet. The surface of the sea was instantly filled with explosions near the Acheron Merchant Guild's fleet. Seeing this, the leader of the blood-stained fleet immediately took a step forward and raised the Neptune's pardon in his hand. With a soft shout, the seawater in front of the fleet gathered and formed a water barrier to block the player's attack. However, he was naturally unable to withstand the attack of countless spells from the players alone. Just before the water barrier shattered, another person raised the Neptune's pardon in his hand and formed a new water barrier behind him. After that, layers of barriers were formed, preventing the players' attacks from breaking through the defense for a while. Seeing that, Elder Ying's face broke into a smile. He felt that he had overestimated the combat power of the player clan. Although there were many spells coming at them, he could tell at a glance that these spells were not worth mentioning at all in terms of strength. However, at this time, the surface of the sea suddenly shook, followed by countless explosions. "There's an ambush underwater," the leader of the blood-stained fleet immediately said. Hearing this, the leaders of the various fleets hurriedly went to the side of the ship and looked down. They instantly noticed that countless blue water balls had appeared in the water. These water balls exploded the moment they came into contact with the warships, creating countless electric arcs on the barrier of the warship. Fortunately, the power of these electric arcs was not enough to destroy the warship's defensive layer. It was only the constant explosions that shook the warship. "Speed up," Elder Ing said calmly. Hearing this, the leaders of the various war chambers of commerce immediately gave the order and the fleet of warships accelerated. The players on the coast saw the Acheron Merchant Guild's warships advancing smoothly through the minefield and could not help but curse in the live chat channel. "Bomberman, come out and explain. Your bombs are selling for such a high price. Where's their power? Fake bombs. Not reliable at all. Refund. Refund. I thought we could blow them up in one go, but this is the result. How infuriating." "Brothers, I only said that the minefield can weaken the defensive layer on the surface of their warships and help you break through their defensive layer. I never said that it can explode. Stop cursing, I'll refund you, but only half. I won't refund the materials. It was clear that the power of this batch of minefield was barely satisfactory. It could not even break through the warship's defensive layer, much to the disappointment of many players. Niefeng was also helpless about this. He felt that the players' expectations of him were too high. Although he did have the ability to create powerful bombs, the prerequisite was that he had enough materials to support it. Without any capital, he could only create some minefield that was less powerful. However, seeing the players' dissatisfaction, Niefeng trembled in fear. He knew that he had exaggerated when he described this new bomb in the forum, so he quickly compromised and chose to return it. As the Acheron Merchant Guild approached the coast, the players' expressions gradually turned grim. Yin Xiaoqi's voice rang in the live chat channel. Everyone retreat. Don't fight them at sea. As long as their warships cannot reach the coast, their greatest advantage will be gone. Hearing this, the players decisively began to retreat. Just as Yin Xiaoqi said, the advantage of warships could only be used at sea. Even if these high-end warships were terrifyingly strong, they would not be a threat if they could not reach the coast. As the players retreated, the coast of Liuli Merchant Guild was soon empty. However, something unexpected happened. As the Acheron Merchant Guild's warships neared the coast, some of them actually entered Liuli Beach and headed in the direction of the players' retreat. At the same time, many figures leaped out from the warships that could not reach the coast. The ones leading the charge were the blood-stained Merchant Guild's merfolk warriors. These war merchant guild members were very familiar with killing. Their expressions were ferocious as they prepared for a massacre. However, when the merfolk stepped into the forest beside the beach, the first row of members suddenly collapsed. "It's an ambush!" the Merchant Guild's high-ranking warrior roared. However, just as he finished speaking, the trees beside him suddenly shook. Then, a translucent figure appeared in front of him, and a sharp dagger pierced into his neck. Cough, cough, cough. Phantom Fish Clan. The blood-stained Merchant Guild's high-ranking warrior spat out a mouthful of blood. "We've come to the wrong place." Illusory Killer pulled out his dagger. His body turned transparent again as he headed for his next target. At this moment, the Phantom Fish clan members lying in ambush in the forest began their assassination. Every time the Phantom Fish clan members appeared, an enemy would fall into a pool of blood. After gaining immortality, the Phantom Fish clan members became as wild as the players. Although they were assassins, it did not matter if they were discovered. They were not afraid of death anyway. Anyone who sees them must die. Under the Phantom Fish clan's powerful assassination skills, the blood-stained Merchant Guild's frontline members were killed in a short period of time. Why is the Phantom Fish clan here? Why are they helping the player clan? Are they tired of living? Seeing this scene, Xueran, who was commanding from the rear, lost his voice. "Brother, the Phantom Fish clan has already sided with the player clan. Didn't anyone tell you?" The Sea King leisurely patted President Xueran's shoulder and said. Then, he snapped his fingers. Immediately, the Mu-Te warships left the coast and headed for the sealed sea behind them. Hearing this, President Xueran's face turned pale. He knew very well how powerful the Phantom Fish clan was. They were the undisputed #1 bounty hunter group in the Devouring Sea. They were definitely not weaker than the blood-stained Merchant Guild. Therefore, when he heard the news of the Phantom Fish clan siding with the player clan, he realized that something was amiss. When he first came into contact with the player clan's combat power did not seem to be a threat to him. Therefore, the Phantom Fish clan siding with the player clan was very strange. Seeing his clansmen being massacred in the forest, President Xueran could not stand it any longer. Without thinking about it, he immediately levitated into the air and headed for the forest beside the Liuli coast. At this moment, the players' counterattack had begun. Countless players suddenly took out their tool hammers, turned around, and dashed toward the warships that were chasing after them. Clink clank 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 clank. According to Yin Xiaoqi, since these warships could come ashore, they would completely dismantle them. It was impossible to defeat them. Therefore, it was necessary to maximize the profit. If they could obtain spare parts, it would be a profit. Chapter 678. Seeing this scene, many of the War Chamber of Commerce's members descended from the warships and charged at the surrounding players. At this time, many warrior players immediately went up and began to fight with them. In terms of average combat power, the players were indeed lacking compared to the war merchants, but there were also exceptions. At this moment, many of the expert players erupted with powerful battle prowess. 1 against 2, 1 against 3, or even more. Their powerful physiques allowed them to display their abilities to their heart's content in battle. However, with the arrival of a large number of War Chamber of Commerce members, the number of players dying in the battle increased. The Bloodstained Chamber of Commerce on the right was restricted by the Illusion Fish tribe and couldn't come over to support them. However, the other War Chambers of Commerce kept coming from the left and front, putting a lot of pressure on the players. The Purple Bend Chamber of Commerce's Sea Demon Legion, in particular, possessed frightening destructive power in group battles. Moreover, they were the bane of mage players. Every time they wailed, the mage players would suffer a mental blow, which would disrupt their spell trajectories and interrupt their casting. However, the unique characteristic of the players was that they were not afraid of death. It wasn't a problem if they couldn't win. The key was to create profit for the team's profit pool. With the War Glory system, the warrior players were no longer afraid of death. They began to actively choose to sacrifice themselves, hugging the enemy and creating the conditions for their comrades to kill. At that moment, the live chat channels of the various clans were filled with shouts. "Healer, where the hell did you go? Look after my HP. Every time I'm about to run out of HP, I have to drink potions. It's very expensive. What's the use of you? The healer is a blacksmith. She's smashing the ship with a hammer. I'll transfer the healer of Team 2 over later. Hold on. I've got him. I've got him. Fire at me. Warriors of the 3rd platoon, hurry up and grab that purple sea demon. This fellow's spiritual attack can deal group damage. It's too powerful. I can't hold it. It's so slippery and disgusting. Assassin from the next team, if you F*King try to steal the kill again, I'll F*King attack you. Have some manners. There was no lack of fun in a life-and-death battle. However, against the invasion of the top 10 war merchant guilds, the pressure on the players gradually increased. Under the pressure of the 10 major war chambers of commerce, the front lines began to shift towards Hell City. But this time, the players didn't panic at all. He had even thought about where the soul coins would come from if Hades City was destroyed. Of course, he was going to take it from the members of the Yellow Springs Chamber of Commerce. What they needed to do now was to create as many opportunities as possible to kill them, so that they could earn soul coins and experience. Since the battle had begun, even if they lost, they would not let the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce have it easy. He wanted to let them know what it meant to be continuous, to grow and multiply endlessly. In the distance, Elder Ing, who was floating in the air, saw this scene, and a smile appeared on his face. He then turned his head to look at the Sea King. Seeing this, the Sea King smiled faintly. If the player clan was really that weak, they would have been wiped out by him a long time ago. Moreover, the strongest aspect of the player clan was never a head-on battle, but an endless stream of despair and other advantages. This battle was only the beginning. Regardless of the outcome, the Sea King was more inclined to favor the player clan's victory. As for whether the player clan would be able to resist the revenge of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce, the Sea King naturally did not know. However, he was looking forward to it. Compared to the Sea King, the players were much calmer. Just like what the Sea King had thought, the players also believed that the battle had only just begun and that there was still more to come. Even if they lost the Mansion of the Dead, they could still continue to fight. After receiving the news of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce's invasion from the Sea King, many players had prepared their nutrient fluids and were already prepared for a prolonged battle. If one day was not enough, they would fight for a week. If not, they would fight for a month. If not, they would fight for a year without a break. Whoever was a coward was a coward. Whoever had a mental breakdown was a coward. Therefore, the players did not have any psychological burden in this battle. All they had to do was fight. The battle lasted for about 3 hours. By then, the front line had been pushed to the center of Lioli district. However, at this moment there was a sudden explosion in the sky. Then, a black crack appeared and expanded rapidly. While the players and the members of the War Chamber of Commerce were shocked, it suddenly rained. It was the demonic ape rain. Countless demonic apes roared as they descended from the sky. Then, they stepped into the battlefield and began to devour all the lives around them. Why are the materials here too? Is it another big battle? Oh ho, the materials are here too. Interesting, we don't have to travel long distances to earn money. Kill everything. The original battle line instantly became chaotic with the arrival of the demonic ape. To the demonic apes, they did not care about the War Chamber of Commerce or the player clan. In short, all lives should be devoured by them. Therefore, they began to devour the players and the members of the War Chamber of Commerce. The players' thoughts were simple. The demonic apes and the members of the War Chamber of Commerce were their soul coins, experience points, and spiritual materials. No matter which side it was, they had to die. The War Chamber of Commerce was confused. Only the members of the War Chamber of Commerce were dumbfounded. They did not understand what was happening. The arrival of the demonic apes caught the people in charge of the War Chamber of Commerce, including Elder Ing, off guard. Moreover, the combat power displayed by the demonic apes was even more unbelievable. The combat power of a demonic ape was almost equivalent to 10 of them. The powerful demonic ape was even more difficult for Elder Ing to deal with. What's going on? Elder Ing immediately asked in a deep voice. However, he glanced at the Sea King from the corner of his eyes. His meaning was self-evident. I only know part of the player clan's secrets. I really don't know. However, I suspect that these creatures are on the player clan's side, the Sea King said with a solemn expression. However, he was actually very calm. If they're on the player clan's side, why are they killing the members of the player clan? Elder Ing immediately asked. Is there a problem? The Sea King nodded calmly. He would not be surprised if anything happened to the player clan now. Because he had seen too much, he was numb to it. The days where he was shocked were long gone. If the demonic apes were on the player clan's side, why would they kill the members of the player clan? The Sea King thought it was easy to explain. After all, the members of the player clan would also kill their own people when they went crazy. Therefore, it was normal. It was very reasonable. Was there anything wrong? With the arrival of the demonic apes, the battlefield changed. At this moment, the demonic apes were in control of the battlefield. They were like tanks that crushed the battlefield, killing and devouring without restraint. However, gradually, the demonic apes realized that they could not absorb the bloodline power after devouring the members of the player clan. Therefore, between the player clan and the members of the Underworld War Chamber of Commerce, they decisively chose to devour the members of the Underworld War Chamber of Commerce. Under the bloody massacre, many members of the War Chamber of Commerce were horrified. To them, the demonic apes were simply demons, a terrifying existence that could not be defeated. They had extremely strong skin defense and powerful attack. They were simply not on the same level of life. Under such an attack, Elder Ing realized that the situation was not good. He immediately took out a mark from his body, activated it, and threw it into the sky. The mark blossomed with blinding light in the air, then disappeared into the sky. The battle below was still going on. Compared to the War Chamber of Commerce, the players were still very calm. The only thing that troubled the players was that the members of the demonic apes were not easy to kill without the soul-devouring beast. It would be great if they could retrieve the soul-devouring beast. This was the thought on all the players' minds. At this moment, a majestic troop suddenly appeared from the northwest of the battlefield. It was the European servers' army that had rushed all the way here. Looking at the huge battlefield that covered the entire Liuli district, the European server players were very excited. They hurriedly followed the army and began to charge. Sure enough, there's meat to eat by following the original server. We've made a killing this time, we're rich. Ha ha ha, it looks like this battle won't end in a short time. Luckily, I've stocked up on nutrient fluids. Kill. This is a big battlefield. Let's fight to the end of this battle. When the soul coins in the team's profit pool exceed 1,000,000, we can get more. I'll charge first. At this moment, the European server players were very excited. Such a huge battlefield represented countless resources and benefit. After this battle, they believed that the combat power of the European server would definitely increase to a new level. With such a feeling, the European server players' blood was ignited. They roared and rushed into the battlefield. Then, they were hammered to death. The level of this battle was so high that even the original server players were having a hard time dealing with it, let alone the European server players. The moment they entered the battlefield, they were attacked by the members of the demonic apes and the war chamber of commerce. In an instant, a large number of players died. At this moment, the European server players were having a mental breakdown. Seeing this scene, the original server players could not help but grin. In this battle, they were fighting and retreating, trying their best to maximize the benefit. They were taking the path of a protracted war. However, the European server players actually wanted to tear an opening and charge into the center of the battlefield. In the eyes of the original server players, they must be crazy about soul coins. What was the saying again? Different circles could not be forced to integrate. Obviously, the European server players did not realize this. At this moment, they were in a complete mess. The original server players watched, and could not help but laugh. At the same time, they typed 666 in the regional live chat channel to show their welcome. Chapter 679. The miserable state of the European server players made the players from the original server, who were fighting to the death, laugh out loud. Although they already knew that the European server players were paying attention to the original server forum and wanted to get a share of the battle, they did not expect the European server players to come at this time. This was because even they were prepared to lose this battle because the enemy was too strong. At this moment, the European server players were full of admiration for the European server players who dared to attack the center of the battlefield in such an environment. Very wild, very gamer. At this moment, many of the original server players could not help but type 666 in the regional channel, cheering for the wild European server players. But soon, the original server players could not laugh anymore. In the battle, other than killing the opponents to obtain soul coins and experience, there was one more thing that the original server players had to do. That was to pick up a wave of materials while the Underworld Chamber of Commerce was killing the demonic ape. The players from the European server quickly realized this. They swarmed toward the demonic apes that had fallen to the ground during the battle. Seeing this scene, the original server players could not hold it in anymore. European server dogs, put down the materials. This is too much. I don't care about you guys stealing the monsters. There are so many of them anyway. You guys are courting death by stealing the materials. F***ck, you put the materials into the channel right in front of me. I'll smash your head, spit them out. Grabbing the neck and shaking, the friendship between the players was so easily broken. At this moment, the original server players attacked without hesitation. All kinds of spells flew toward the European server players. The frontline warriors also changed their direction and attacked the European server army. He could tolerate anything, but he could not let go of the expensive materials. Therefore, under the shocked gazes of Elder Ing and the higher-ups of the War Chamber of Commerce, the players began to kill each other. the battlefield became even more chaotic in an instant. The battle area was divided into two parts. On one side was the battle between the demonic apes and the underworld chamber of commerce, and on the other side was the battle between the original server players and the European server players. At this moment, the only one who was calm was the Sea King. Seeing the shock on the faces of Elder Ing and the others, the Sea King could not help but show a look of contempt. This was normal operation. What was there to be surprised about? Country bumpkins who had not seen much. At this moment, Elder Ing turned to look at the Sea King and the others and said, "Sea King, go to the back of the sea and hold the fort. The rest of you, attack with me." Upon hearing this, the Sea King did not hesitate at all. He decisively turned around and headed in the direction of the sea. Such a terrifying war, he did not want to stay a moment longer. Although he did not know why Elder Ing was taking such good care of him, but he must definitely grab hold of such an opportunity. Fighting and killing, who knows if there would be no one left. It was much more comfortable to sit back and watch the show. Therefore, the Sea King decided to leave. Although the rest of the people in charge of the War Merchants Guild were displeased, they still chose to listen to Elder Ying's orders and followed him to charge towards the Demon Ape clan who were in the midst of a massacre. With the addition of Elder Ing and the others, the pressure on the members of the Underworld Merchant Guild was greatly reduced. But Elder Ing soon ran into trouble as well. A demon ape with its back covered in white fur stared at him, and in that short exchange of blows, Elder Ing was shocked to discover that the power displayed by the demon ape was something that he found hard to defend against. There were many such powerful demonic apes on the battlefield, and more were still falling from the sky. Elder Ying's heart was filled with shock, unable to imagine what kind of species these demon apes were, to be so terrifying. But at that moment, he could only grit his teeth and deal with them. At the same time, he suddenly felt a little excited. Just now, he had activated the communication sigil. Soon, the higher-ups of the Underworld Devouring Sea Division would receive his message and send it to the Underworld headquarters in the Central Sea. As long as support arrived, he believed that both the Player Clan and the Demon Apes would die. Although he hated the Underworld Merchant Guild, he had to admit that the Underworld Merchant Guild was powerful. And these powerful demon apes would also make the Underworld Merchant Guild pay a certain price. This was something that Elder Ing was very happy to see. As a descendant of the Shadow Clan who was lurking in the Underworld Merchant Guild, he was looking forward to what was about to happen next. Below, the battle between the players was getting more and more intense. Shouts and curses could be heard in the live chat channel. The players from the original server were scolding the players from the European server for not knowing their limits and only knowing how to snatch materials and equipment. The players from the European server were scolding the players from the original server for being bastards who only knew how to monopolize. The battlefield was not owned by the original server, so why couldn't they just pick up materials? Hence, the conflict intensified. Moreover, the players from the two servers were already at odds with each other, so they were merciless when they fought. At the same time, whenever they saw a demon ape falling next to them, they would pounce in that direction with bloodshot eyes. Then, they would beat each other up again. Seeing the players killing each other so fiercely, the members of the Underworld Merchant Guild who were fighting were dumbfounded. They were even a little embarrassed to attack again. Moreover, the demon apes seemed to be targeting them. Hence, the members of the Underworld Merchant Guild decisively focused all their firepower on the demon ape. At this moment, the battle was completely chaotic. The target of the Underworld Merchant Guild was the Player Clan, and the target of the demon apes was the Player Clan. However, by chance they ended up fighting each other. At this moment, Lu Wu, who was watching the battle from behind the scenes, was so shocked that the chips in his hand fell to the ground. He subconsciously rubbed Lil Bei Li's head and let out a sigh. Compared to the center of Liuli district where the battle was the most intense, a fierce battle was also taking place in the forest by the coast. The battle between the Illusion Fish Clan and the Bloodstained Merchant Guild had also entered a white-hot stage. At this moment, above the forest, Huan Sha and Xueran were engaged in a fierce battle. Xueran had always heard of Huan Sha's famous name. However, he only realized how terrifying he was after fighting him. The flawless concealment technique, the ghostly movement technique, and the unexpected attack all made him miserable. Fortunately, as a member of the Armored Sea Dragon clan, he had extremely strong physical defense. Otherwise, he would be killed in such a battle. However, he knew that he couldn't continue like this. If he continued to be exhausted by Huan Sha, he would be the one to die in the battle, not Huan Sha. At this thought, Xueran's expression turned sinister. He gritted his teeth and made a decision. At this moment, Huan Sha's figure suddenly appeared on his left. With a cold flash, he stabbed his steel trident at his left rib. However, this time, Xueran didn't choose to dodge or defend. Instead, he reached out and grabbed Huan Sha's neck. The sound of a sharp blade piercing through flesh resounded. At the same time, Xueran grabbed Huan Sha. The sudden burst of bone-chilling coldness in his body made Xueran shiver. Then, he spat out a mouthful of blood. However, he knew that this sacrifice was worth it. Against Huan Sha, he couldn't rely on defense to defeat him. He could only choose to sacrifice part of his body in exchange for a chance to counterattack. Huan Sha was a member of the Illusion Fish Clan. Although his assassination ability was extremely strong, his physical defense was extremely weak. Now that Xueran had caught him, victory was at hand. Thinking of this, Xueran's expression turned sinister. His cheating arm suddenly erupted with power and grabbed Huan Sha's neck tightly. Then, he suddenly punched at Huan Sha. However, something unexpected happened. Not only did Huan Sha not choose to defend, but he also sent his steel trident into Xueran's body, taking the punch head-on. At this moment, both of them spat out blood at the same time. Xueran couldn't help but shiver, and his body stiffened. However, he didn't stop. He immediately punched again. At this moment, he had gained the advantage. He was sure that if Huan Sha wanted to live, he would definitely choose to defend. However, it was obvious that Huan Sha didn't want that. When Xueran punched Huan Sha's face, causing it to cave in, Huan Sha raised his steel trident and pierced Xueran's lung. F***ck your lungs. Xueran coughed up blood again. His expression was one of disbelief. Do you want to die? Huan Sha didn't say anything because his head was completely cracked. He was only relying on his consciousness to support himself. At this moment, Xueran noticed that Huan Sha's arm was trembling. At this moment, Xueran couldn't hold on any longer because he realized that Huan Sha really didn't want to live anymore. He wanted to die together with him. Therefore, he decisively threw Huan Sha away, turned around, and sped toward the sea, scattering red dots along the way. Lunatic, lunatic. He's obviously from the Assassin clan, but he wants to die together with me. What a lunatic! Xueran cursed in his heart as he sped toward the sea. However, as he flew, his speed became slower and slower. The cold that kept erupting in his body made him shiver from time to time, and blood kept flowing out of his mouth. As the injuries in his body worsened, Xueran started to feel the fear of death. He immediately took out a pill and popped it into his mouth. Then, he picked up his speed and flew in the direction of the Sea King. At this moment, there was a huge battle going on in Liuli district. Flying there would be suicidal. Therefore, the only person he could ask for help from was the Sea King. Xueran endured the pain and discomfort in his body and arrived at the back of the sea, which was the area where the Mu Te fleet had sealed off the sea. Then, he fell toward the leading Mu Te fleet's warship. Thud. He fell heavily on the deck with a loud thud. Get the Sea King here, Xueran said with a ferocious face as he lifted his head to look at the surprised Mu Te soldiers around him. As he spoke, he couldn't help but cough out a mouthful of blood. The nearby Mu-Te soldiers looked at each other, but they still chose to turn around and inform the Sea King. Soon, the Sea King, who had received the news, rushed over. When he saw Xueran in a sorry state, he had a strange look on his face. "Brother, what happened to you? Sea King, save me." Xueran coughed out a mouthful of blood and looked at the Sea King with a pale face. "No problem." The Sea King immediately took a step forward and helped Xueran up from the ground. Then, he helped him sit down and injected his energy into Xueran's body to check on his condition. "Help me expel the chill in my body. Quick, it's constantly destroying the vitality in my body," Xueran said in a hoarse voice. The Sea King nodded but did not act immediately. Instead, he continued to check on Xueran. After confirming that Xueran's body was in a terrible condition, the Sea King suddenly smiled. At this moment, a ray of light shone on his forehead and the Death's light wheel appeared in his hand. He stabbed it into Xueran's right chest and pierced through his heart. Why? Xueran's body trembled as he looked at the Sea King in disbelief. In fact, he had thought about asking the Sea King for help. Although the top 10 war chambers of commerce did not like each other, they were not competitors. This was because they were all qualified to be part of the war chambers of commerce. However, he did not expect the Sea King to suddenly intervene. At this moment, the Sea King suddenly moved his mouth close to his ear and whispered, "I'm sorry, I'm actually a spy." The vitality in Xueran's body was completely depleted. He died with his eyes wide open. Chapter 680. After killing Xueran, the Sea King calmly signaled his subordinates to search his body. The Sea King did not hesitate after collecting all the valuables on Shwedi's body. He kicked Shwedi's corpse into the sea and fed it to the fishes. The Sea King had no qualms about killing one of the people in charge of the War Chamber of Commerce. After all, he had inherited the inheritance of the Shadow Clan. In the future, fighting against the Yellow Springs Chamber of Commerce was a path he would have to take. Moreover, there was a fierce battle in Liuli district at this time. Who would know that he had killed Xueran? Even if he was asked, he would say that he didn't see it. "That's why I'm so calm." Thinking of this, the Sea King grinned. His body then floated into the air and began to look in the direction of Liuli district, observing the battle royale there. This was the first time the Sea King felt so happy watching someone fight to the death. This melon was really delicious. In the direction of Liuli district, the battle continued. At this moment, even if Elder Ing and the others were to attack with all their might, they were still no match for the Demon Ape Clan's powerful battle prowess. As more and more demonic apes descended from the sky, someone finally couldn't take it anymore. They did not have the fearless mentality of the Player Clan. To many members of the War Commerce Chamber, death was the end. Moreover, they couldn't see any hope of victory against the demonic ape tribe. Therefore, they felt that there was no hope for them to continue fighting. The first to choose to escape was the leader of the Dragon Horn Fleet. His figure twisted in the air to turn into a long snake, to fly into the distance, not even bothering to bid farewell to Elder Ing. Although he feared Elder Ing, but at the juncture of life and death, he still chose to live on. As for whether the Underworld Chamber of Commerce would seek revenge in the future, he couldn't care less about it now. He had to survive first. As Jiao Jiao fled, the leader of the Sword Crown Fleet's heart wavered. At this moment, he suddenly turned around and followed. When the remaining guild leaders saw this scene, their hearts wavered. However, while they gritted their teeth and persevered, they, too, had thoughts of leaving. Seeing that the two guild leaders had chosen to flee, the War Chamber of Commerce's members, who were fighting below, lost their morale, and their combat power fell by a notch. Facing the ferocious attacks of the demonic ape race, they were like lambs waiting to be slaughtered. Especially when they saw their companions being devoured by the ferocious demonic ape, the mental blow caused them to tremble in fear. At that moment, Elder Ying's face was ashen. However, he was powerless to stop the people in charge of the War Merchant Guild from leaving. At this time, He could not even protect himself. Under the attacks of the ferocious demon ape, he could only try his best to dodge. At the same time, he cursed in his heart why the reinforcements had not arrived yet. At this moment, a crack suddenly appeared in the sky, and 3 figures emerged from it. The leader was wearing a golden robe. He stood on the head of an azure dragon and looked coldly at the battle below. At that moment, his gaze suddenly locked onto the figure of Elder Ing, who was dressed in the branch elder's long robes, and his figure immediately disappeared from where he stood. When he reappeared, he was already right before Elder Ing. Elder Ing, who swallowed the sea region? You were the one who sent out the call for help? The man's expression was cold as he asked Elder Ing. Lord Divine Envoy, it's me. When Elder Ing heard it, he immediately replied with a look of pleasant surprise. The man nodded in response. Then, he reached behind him and made a grabbing motion. In an instant, the demonic ape let out a howl of agony as it was crushed into a pile of meat paste by an invisible force. Looking at the divine envoy killing the devil ape that he had been unable to defeat so easily, Elder Ying's body shuddered. He knew that this was the true power of the Netherworld. As for the various branches of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce in the outside world, they were just agencies set up by the headquarters to collect money from the outside world. Only the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce in the Central Sea region was able to deter the various forces of the major sea regions, causing them to not dare to act rashly. And the man in front of him was from the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce in the Central Sea region, and his strength had reached the divine realm. Explain the situation to me in detail. The man spoke at that moment. Although the sounds of battle were deafening and the members of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce were dying one after another, it was as if he did not care at all. He did not choose to help immediately but asked Elder Ing instead. When Elder Ing saw that, he cursed in his heart. However, he still honestly explained what happened here and purposely pretended to be seriously injured to slow down his speech because he did not care whether the members of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce around him died or not. After listening to Elder Ying's description, the divine envoy turned his head to look at the crack in space and immediately showed a look of disdain. To be able to tear the crack in space so easily, it must be a divine realm expert like him. But so what? He was a god that could stand tall in the Central Sea region of the Netherworld, and not an ordinary god could fight against him. At that moment, his heart was the same as Haka when he first came to Baki, full of disdain towards the outside world. Because in his eyes, the gods from the outside world were just trash that could not stand in an area full of powerhouses. On the other hand, he came from the most powerful Central Sea region of the Netherworld, so he was on a higher level. Thinking of this, the divine envoy turned his head to look at the other 2 divine envoys and nodded. Seeing that, the other 2 divine envoys flew down abruptly. A purple ribbon flew out from one of their sleeves and began to wander around the battlefield at a speed that was hard to be seen by the naked eye. All the demonic apes that touched the ribbon could not help but let out a scream before their bodies instantly melted into a pool of blood. This caused one of the divine envoys to take out a golden scroll. As he muttered softly, a visible wave of magical energy rippled around him. It was the same pardon of the sea god, but the one in his hand was completely different from the one in the hands of the Sea King and the others. As he shouted softly, countless water elemental giants were condensed around him, and they crashed downward, fighting with the demonic apes. Relying on their limitless regenerative bodies, the water elemental giants exploded with combat power that could fight against the demonic ape. With the addition of these water elemental giants, the demonic apes lost their advantage and could only wait to be killed. At that moment, the leader of the divine envoys flew toward the crack in space where the demonic apes were still falling. At that moment, his idea was very simple, and that was to pass through the crack in space and kill the god behind the scenes. As for the demonic apes below, he could leave them to the other 2 companions who came with him. Arriving at the mouth of the crack, the divine envoy looked at the demonic apes that were swarming toward him. He waved his hand forward, and the spiritual energy of heaven and earth gathered and condensed into a ball in his palm. It kept expanding, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a scorching ball of light with a diameter of more than 100 meters. He then threw it toward the direction of the crack in space. Instantly, countless demonic apes that were falling were swallowed by the ball of light, and the sudden explosion killed a large number of demonic apes at the back of the passage. However, the expected spatial tremors did not occur. The space passage that was attacked was still extremely strong, and not even a crack appeared. Seeing this, the divine envoy's expression turned serious. As a god on the underworld god list, are you sure you want to challenge me? At that moment, a deep voice suddenly sounded from the other end of the space. Hearing this, the divine envoy's expression turned serious, but he still said without hesitation, "You are the one who is challenging the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. It is you who is challenging my Underworld Chamber of Commerce. It is not too late to stop now. Otherwise, you know what the consequences will be." The Netherworld Chamber of Commerce? I think I've heard of it. Is it very powerful? A sneer came from the passage. How dare you offend the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce? Hearing this, the divine envoy's expression turned pale, and then he immediately moved toward the crack. As a god on the side of the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce, he had a strong sense of belonging to the Netherworld Chamber of Commerce. Now that he was provoked, he naturally could not tolerate it anymore, and immediately chose to attack. Don't come over, it's just a waste of time. I'll send you to reincarnation. As soon as the voice fell, the divine envoy, who had just stepped into the space passage, suddenly saw a long black stick flying toward him. Realizing that the god on the other end of the space had attacked him, the divine envoy sneered and raised his hand to grab the black stick, wanting to refine it. However, the moment his palm came into contact with the black iron stick, the divine envoy's face suddenly turned pale, and he could not help but cough out a mouthful of golden blood. An unparalleled, vast power came from the iron stick, instantly shattering the spiritual chi circulation in his body, and even draining the accumulated spiritual chi in his body. At that moment, his figure retreated rapidly, and in the blink of an eye, he was pushed out of the space passage. At that moment, the divine envoy realized that something was wrong. He immediately wanted to escape from the pressure of the black iron stick, but at that moment, he was shocked to find that he could not move. As he watched in horror, the black iron stick expanded with the wind, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a huge stick that reached the sky, and smashed into the ground with a loud bang. Dong! The huge black iron stick pierced the ground. The earth shook and the ground instantly cracked. Strong winds swept in all directions, stirring up sand and dust, making it difficult to open one's eyes. Under this attack, the world suddenly changed and countless space cracks were torn in all directions. They quickly disappeared and then reappeared. The players and the members of the Underworld Chamber of Commerce, who were fighting nearby, were all turned into dust by the violent power of this attack. Only the members of the Demon Ape clan were not harmed by this attack. It was as if all the power had automatically avoided the members of the Demon Ape clan. At that moment, other than Elder Ing and a few other experts, the rest of the lives were wiped out. At that moment, the smiles on the faces of the other two divine envoys froze, and they revealed expressions of disbelief. How is this possible? The power of an ancient god. Jin Zhu is dead. I can't feel the undulations of his soul power. Realizing that their companion had died, they completely panicked. They had thought that it was just a provocation from an external force that they could easily resolve. But it was clear that this time, things were not as they had imagined. The two divine envoys subconsciously looked at Elder Ing and asked with fear on their faces, "Who did you offend? Why didn't you inform us in advance?" Elder Ing, who had exhausted his strength, opened his mouth weakly, but did not know how to answer, and only felt bitter in his heart. An ancient god? I thought it was just an ordinary god." At that moment, the players from the original server and the European server, who were engaged in a fierce battle, looked at the gradually dimming interface, and they were all dumbfounded. Although he was already dead, the live chat channel exploded in an instant. The players from the original server and the European server were spamming the screen with. Many players only saw a black iron stick suddenly appear in the sky, and then there was no then. Whoosh. It was too fast, so fast that they were caught off guard. They did not even have the time to shout words like F***ck and awesome. Although the players could not shout F***ck, the Sea King, who was watching the battle from afar, subconsciously blurted out, F***ck, that's awesome. He was so familiar with his words that he could no longer change them. Chapter 681. The appearance of the black iron rod ended the battle in an instant. Liuli district was smashed into smithereens. Violent energy swept out, turning everything in its path into dust. Such godly power not only stunned the players who were still fighting, but also the remaining 2 divine envoys from the Yellow Springs trading firm. At this moment they knew that they were wrong. This wasn't a god from the suburbs, but an ancient god realm master they couldn't fight against. They were filled with resentment towards the Yellow Springs branch of the Devouring Sea domain for not sending such important information to the headquarters, causing them to fall into danger. But the situation was urgent, and they didn't have time to think. They each took out a talisman, activated it, and threw it into the air. The 2 talismans shone brilliantly in the air. At this moment, an arm covered in white hair slowly stretched out from the spatial crack at the side, and with a vast power, it grabbed the 2 gods' envoys. The situation was urgent. The 2 divine envoys acted at the same time, circulating their strength to form layers of defensive barriers in front of them. Boom! At the moment of impact, the giant white arm broke through the layers of defensive barriers and slammed into the 2 divine envoys. The 2 divine envoys from the Yellow Springs trading firm were instantly sent flying by the powerful force. Their bodies were injured in one blow, and the spiritual energy in their bodies was depleted in order to block the attack. But before they could recover, the giant arm reached for them again. At this moment, their faces were ashen. Such a powerful force wasn't something they could withstand. Moreover, they were sure that the ancient god behind the spatial crack was not an ordinary ancient god realm god, but an even more terrifying existence. Before the giant arm reached them, a fierce gust of wind enveloped them, making them feel the threat of death. But just as the giant arm was about to hit them, the 2 glowing talismans in the sky suddenly tore open a spatial crack, and a figure emerged from it. In an instant, time slowed down and the air seemed to freeze. The newcomer wore a golden robe with the word Yellow Springs embroidered on the back. A sword-shaped divine seal was imprinted between his brows, and he carried an ancient bronze longsword on his back. He stood proudly in the sky with his hands behind his back. His calm eyes were filled with vicissitudes of life, as if he had seen through the vicissitudes of time and history. Along with his appearance, the devil-ape Venerable's huge palm suddenly retracted. Then, countless sharp sword auras appeared in the place where the devil-ape Venerable had been standing. As they intersected, countless tiny spatial cracks appeared. Venerable's sword. Master. Upon seeing this person, the 2 Yellow Springs divine emissaries, who thought that they had escaped death, were overjoyed. They immediately lowered their heads and paid their respects to the figure hovering in the air. Venerable Sword didn't reply, and his indifferent eyes looked at the spatial crack. As an ancient god realm god, it isn't appropriate to attack a junior. So what? Venerable Devil Ape's voice came from within the spatial crack. Upon hearing this, a golden light shone from Venerable Sword's glabella. His body did not move, but countless sword auras formed out of thin air and shot towards the crack in space. In an instant, the spatial crack shook and was divided into countless pieces. Then, it was slowly repaired and hidden by the invisible power of the laws. However, after the sword chi flew through the spatial passageway, Sword Venerable's face suddenly turned solemn. Suddenly receiving a cry for help from a junior, Huang Xiaolong rushed over immediately. When he saw the giant white arm, he was certain that the person behind the space crack was as strong as him, an ancient God Realm master. Although the honorable swordsman was surprised, he did not find it difficult to deal with, because in a battle of the same cultivation realm, besides the individual experts in the Central Sea region, he was able to suppress all of them with the divine seal of the Sword Tao. Therefore, he was not worried at all when facing the venerable devil ape. However, when the heart sword eye, accompanied by the sword chi, penetrated the space crack and arrived at the other end, Sword Venerable's body trembled. The rich spiritual chi fluctuations around him made him realize that this was no ordinary place. After a careful examination, he was shocked to discover that this was actually the Naraka realm. There were two places in the underworld where experts gathered. On the mainland, the strongest was the Naraka realm. It was a new world formed from the body of the strongest expert below the Emperor realm, Xitigarbha. There were 18 world boundaries inside, attracting countless experts to set foot on this land. Countless God's realm and ancient God realm experts were born in the Naraka realm. The Naraka realm was on a completely different level compared to the other big domains on the mainland. The most famous and complicated spell system in the underworld, the Naraka realm, was born in this land. Equally famous as the Naraka realm was in the direction of the sea region, the place closest to the 6 paths of reincarnation. It was also the Yellow Springs Sea God's resting place, the Yellow Springs Central Sea. That place was rich in spiritual materials with divinity. It was a holy land of resources that even the gods yearned for. It was also the place where the battle for supremacy in the sea region was the most intense. On one side was the strongest on the mainland, and on the other side was the strongest in the sea region. Both sides were home to a group of top experts from the underworld. After discovering that the figure behind the space crack was a Naraka realm expert, the honorable swordsman's face turned solemn. He knew that he had met his match this time. Yellow Springs Trading Firm, Honorable Swordsman. At this moment, the honorable swordsman took the initiative to disperse his sword chi. He looked at the space crack and spoke. His voice condensed into a force that pierced through the space crack and arrived at the other end. I don't want to know who you are. If you want to fight, let's fight, the honorable demonic ape replied without hesitation. This attitude made the honorable swordsman very embarrassed. However, at this moment, he really didn't want to become enemies with a powerful expert like the honorable demonic ape. It wasn't because he was afraid. It was because a new batch of spiritual materials with divinity had been born near the 6 paths of reincarnation recently. This had caused the Yellow Springs Central Sea to become turbulent. The battle between the major forces for the spiritual materials had intensified. It was a very unwise choice for the Yellow Springs Chamber of Commerce to make an enemy of a Naraka realm expert at this time. How about we each take a step back? The honorable swordsman continued to speak in a negotiating tone. I killed one of your juniors. Are you sure you want to each take a step back? The honorable demonic ape's tone was slightly sarcastic. Hearing this, the honorable swordsman was furious. You really want to become enemies with the Yellow Springs Chamber of Commerce? You alone aren't enough to become enemies with the Yellow Springs Chamber of Commerce. The honorable demonic ape couldn't help but burst into laughter when he heard this. He had never been afraid of opponents who were stronger than him. Before he became a god, he dared to become enemies with the powerful Corpse clan. He fought against several Corpse clan gods with his demigod realm cultivation base. He even broke through to the god realm during the battle and fought the Corpse clan head-on. After that, he dared to become enemies with the ancient god realm Corpse god with his god realm cultivation base. In the end, he defeated the Corpse god step by step and took everything from him. Therefore, the honorable swordsman's threat was useless to the honorable demonic ape. Instead, it made him a little excited. However, just as the honorable demonic ape was about to respond, he suddenly looked at the dozens of little apes climbing on his body. At this moment, a hint of warmth appeared on his ferocious face, and the battle intent in his heart disappeared. This was because he suddenly remembered the time when he was enemies with the Corpse Clan. At that time, he was also fearless. However, it didn't mean that his clansmen weren't afraid. Even though he had the courage to become enemies with the Corpse God, he didn't have the ability to protect his clansmen. In the end, he was the only one left in this world while all his clansmen died. In the days that followed, the long period of loneliness made him feel extremely painful. Now that he had reforged the bodies of his clansmen and allowed them to be reborn, Venerable Devil Ape suddenly realized that the boundless battle intent in his heart seemed to be restrained because of this. The Honorable Sword's question seemed to be directed at the Honorable Demonic Ape. Can you still accept the loneliness of having all your clansmen die? After a moment of silence, the Venerable Devil Ape took a deep breath and spoke slowly. Since that's the case, let's each take a step back and leave. Facing such an arrogant Venerable Devil Ape, Venerable Sword was already prepared to retaliate. But when he heard that Venerable Devil Ape was willing to compromise, he couldn't help but be stunned. All right, but I absolutely can't let the matter rest with the death of my junior. In the future, I'll definitely head to the path of hell to seek guidance from you. I'll wait for you. After Paragon Devil Ape finished speaking, with a thought, the black iron rod that pierced through the ground suddenly rose up from the ground. It passed through the spatial crack and arrived beside Paragon Devil Ape. Immediately after, countless devil apes were pulled into the sky by a powerful suction force, flying into the spatial crack. At the sight of this, the players who were watching the battle in gray screen mode wailed. Fight, why aren't you fighting anymore? Didn't you say that the coward would be the coward? The epic of the year ended with an opening cinematic? Did I die in vain? Come out, UB**starred official. If I don't see them fight to the death today, I won't be able to rest in peace. I thought that after watching the battle, we would resurrect and collect the corpses. I didn't expect it to end just like that. F***CK, Crayon Shinchan. I won't be able to rest in peace. F***King official, come out and change the development of the plot. Shouldn't we be fighting to the death? There's definitely something wrong with your script. We must fix this bug. It seems like the Venerable Devil Ape is going to start a war with the Underworld Chamber of Commerce. I've already thought about the development of the plot. The war should be getting more and more intense. Then, the entire Underworld Central Sea and the Naraka realm will start a war. Then, we players will laugh and watch them fight. We'll make a fortune from the war and finally become the strongest force in the underworld. Then, we'll attack the outworld. Obviously, the script is wrong now. UB**starred official, it's all your fault for coming out and getting beaten up. Lu Wu was dumbfounded as he looked at the players' comments in the regional channel. I was eating chips with Lil Bailey and watching the battle. How did I end up being the scapegoat? Whether they fight or not, it's none of my business. A bunch of B***TCHY players, they're out of control. I'll remember this grudge. It's not that the time hasn't come yet. Just when the players thought that the war was over, an unexpected scene appeared. After all the devil apes flew into the space rift, the space rift slowly closed. Venerable Sword led Elder Ing and the others toward the direction of the sea. However, at this moment, the closed space rift suddenly tore open again. Then, a gigantic black iron rod suddenly emerged from it and crashed toward Venerable Sword and the others. Venerable Sword immediately sensed the energy fluctuation coming from behind. The Sword Dao Divine seal on his forehead shone with a dazzling light. The bronze long sword on his back was unsheathed and expanded with the wind. In the blink of an eye, it turned into a gigantic sword and stabbed toward the black iron rod. The scene was truly unexpected, and the players who were cursing were also stunned. Seeing that the battle had started again, the regional live chat channel was flooded with 666. The spectators from both the local server and the European server were pleasantly surprised. They all felt that the venerable devil ape was simply a cunning old fox. I like it. Chapter 682. The strike was ferocious, but fortunately, the venerable sword responded in time. The moment the giant sword collided with the iron rod, his figure flashed, tearing the space apart and disappearing with Elder Ing and the others. The venerable sword's judgment was undoubtedly correct. The iron rod pressed down on the giant sword and hit the area where he was originally at. A spider web suddenly appeared in the space, and the space shattered like glass, revealing countless space cracks. After missing its target, the iron rod tore a space tunnel in front of it and disappeared into it, chasing after the venerable sword. As the two space cracks in the sky slowly closed, everything returned to its original state. The players? The Sea King, who was watching the battle from afar. At this moment, the players and the Sea King were dumbfounded. They thought they could witness the battle with their own eyes, but it seemed like they did not intend to fight here at all. Instead, they moved to another place. The irascible players wailed again. At this moment, Lu Wu was the only one who could see the battle. Relying on his privilege, he immediately turned the camera and pointed it at the venerable demonic ape and the venerable sword who were fighting across space. Just now, Lu Wu noticed a strange scene. Under the artifact's monitoring, the black iron rod seemed to send a message. After the message appeared, the venerable demonic ape, who had chosen to stop the battle, suddenly attacked again. This made Lu Wu wonder if there was someone behind the venerable demonic ape. The message was like an order. He could tell that the venerable demonic ape had the intention to compromise, but he changed his mind after receiving the message. Thinking of this, Lu Wu decisively tracked the iron rod's trajectory in space and pointed the camera at it. At this moment, the giant cocoon in the center of the heavenly realm had opened again, and the Grand Supreme who was inside had a smile on his face. The time had come, and he decided to take advantage of this opportunity to stir up trouble. Do you think you can stop fighting just because you say so? Have you asked me? As the battle began, Lu Wu was ready to watch the drama unfold. However, as he watched, he suddenly did not want to watch anymore. In the battle across space, the venerable sword summoned his divine seal sword to cross space. However, the iron rod was firmly behind him, so the venerable sword could not get his hands on his sword. He could only cross space to temporarily dodge. This led to a scene that left Lu Wu speechless. Venerable sword's figure appeared somewhere in the underworld, followed by the iron rod. Venerable sword, who had no other choice, tore the space to escape again. The iron rod immediately followed. At this time, Venerable sword's divine seal sword also arrived. However, the sword master had already left. The divine seal sword could only tear through space and continue to follow the sword master. Three sides, one chasing the other, shuttling back and forth endlessly. The camera kept switching wildly. Lu Wu felt like he was going to throw up. Within a second, countless cameras flashed past, and the scene was constantly flickering. How could he endure this? Lu Wu watched for about an hour. He was speechless when he realized that the scene was still the same. He immediately lost interest. I'm not going to watch anymore. I'm not going to watch anymore. I'm just going to fight and crazily switch screens. As for the outcome of the battle, Lu Wu planned to find out more about it after the battle officially began. I won't be accompanying you for now. Although Lu Wu did not plan to continue watching the battle, he sent a message to the 6 paths of reincarnation through the artifact. The change in the venerable demonic ape made Lu Wu feel very suspicious. This was because he knew that the great emperor of the underworld had never cared about the battles between the forces of the underworld. As an ancient god, other than the great emperor of the underworld, who else could command the venerable demonic ape? Therefore, he decided to inform the strongest big shots of the underworld. This message floated in the 6 paths of reincarnation and was quickly captured by the great Emperor of the Dongyu. After checking it, the great Emperor of the Dongyu shook his head gently and smiled. "What's the matter?" At this moment, a voice sounded beside the great Emperor of the Dongyu. "Fengdu, do you remember the ancient god demonic ape? The person behind it has made his move. Haha, that rod should be the Taishang's Tai Ching rod. Does he really think he can control the demonic ape? It's wishful thinking. Don't forget that the demonic ape clan was born from the evolved body of Xidigarba. Xidigarba's blood flows in their bodies. Although it's thin, it's enough." The great Emperor of the Dongyu could not help but laugh when he thought of the Xidigarba, who dared to shake the heaven realm. The person with the chess piece thinks that he controls the chess game, but he doesn't know that the chess piece has never been of one mind. Ridiculous, ridiculous! The battle ended with the departure of the demonic ape Venerable and the sword Venerable. The players did not expect the mansion of the dead to remain unscathed after the battle. 3 hours later, the players resurrected in the main city one after another, and the forum began to discuss the situation of the battle. There were even professional players, who started live streaming and analyzing who had the highest chance of winning the battle. These players did have the ability to analyze the situation of the battle and not make baseless claims. Due to the huge historical knowledge stored in the library, the players could analyze the battle from all angles. With a complete view of the world, everything was traceable. Therefore, the forum was bustling with all kinds of bets, and the players expressed their opinions. When there were different opinions, they would take out screenshots of the historical records and explain the battle according to the content. For example, take a look at the History of the Underworld C, Volume 5, Chapter 1742. The sword Venerable of the Underworld is a powerhouse who rarely has a match in the same realm. He has killed many deities. How can he lose? Another example was, what do you know? The demonic ape Venerable was able to fight the corpse deity when he was only in the god realm. Go read the history twice before you come here. How can you show off if you are uncultured? Don't think that you can use the history of the sword Venerable of the Underworld to show off. You are too weak. There were even players who did not want to argue with these players who had some historical knowledge. They simply said, "I don't care what history you have. I'm betting on the demonic ape Venerable's victory. If he loses, I'll livestream myself eating sh*t. Who dares to bet with me?" Just like the forum of the local server, the forum of the European server was also bustling. It could be said that the players did not lose anything in this battle. Although they died en masse, they did not lose anything. The 10 war chambers of commerce suffered the most. They originally had a great advantage in this battle. However, as the demonic ape Venerable attacked, everything turned into nothingness and was sent into the 6 paths of reincarnation. It was so tragic that the players felt it was a pity. Of course, it was a pity that so many soul coins and experience points disappeared just like that. As for the Sea King who was watching the battle from the back of the sea region, he was relieved after the demonic ape Venerable and the sword Venerable disappeared. After witnessing the entire battle, cold sweat broke out on his forehead. He was glad that Elder Ing had asked him to hold the line at the back. If he was fighting at the front line, he would have been dead. Looking at the ruined Liuli district, the Sea King decisively chose to bring the Mu Te fleet home. At the same time, he thought about how he would report the battle to the Devouring Sea branch. However, when he thought about how he would be the only war chamber of commerce among the 10 war chambers of commerce, the Sea King was shocked and scared at the same time. He had been watching the battle from the sidelines, but how did he become the #1 war chamber of commerce under the underworld branch of the Devouring Sea? He recalled that the underworld headquarters recently had a batch of resources to be distributed to the underworld branch of the underworld to be distributed to the war chambers of commerce to help them grow, but now, he was the only war chamber of commerce left in the Devouring Sea branch. Awesome! After understanding his current situation, the Sea King grinned from ear to ear. He was extremely happy. What could be happier than getting stronger while lying down? The Sea King was elated. For the next few days, the forum was still discussing the battle between the demonic ape Venerable and the sword Venerable, forming two factions. One side said that the underworld sword Venerable would definitely win, while the other side said that the demonic ape Venerable would definitely win. Neither side could convince the other. The leader of these two factions was, reading more than books, who had a wealth of battle history knowledge. After analyzing the rise of the underworld sword Venerable, he believed that the underworld sword Venerable would win. Many players agreed with him. On the other side was Crayon Shinchan. After analyzing the battle from all angles, he believed that the demonic ape Venerable would win. Therefore, the two factions started a confrontation on the forum. Soon, a large number of players from the European server joined in. After reading the analysis of the two, they chose the side they agreed with and joined in. They also slammed the table and clamored. When faced with stubborn forum players who refused to listen to their explanations, some hot-tempered players could not help but curse their entire families. However, this kind of enthusiasm gradually subsided after a few days. The reason was very simple. No matter what the outcome was, they would not be able to see it. It was useless no matter what they said. Without seeing it with their own eyes, it was just empty talk. Moreover, they could not use their own words to convince the players from the opposing camp to agree with their views. They had to see it with their own eyes. However, soon a new hot post appeared again. This time, the hot post appeared in all 5 major servers at the same time, causing a heated discussion and a sensation among the players of the entire battle. Battle official. Halloween server-wide carnival is about to begin. Officially releasing the event notice. The moment the players saw the event notice, they were naturally excited. This was because the appearance of the event meant that the stingy officials were finally going to bleed. Regarding the event, all the players had the same mentality. They were all prepared to perform well on that day and strive to earn a fortune from the hands of the officials. However, the players from the Naraka server and the other servers had a doubt in their hearts. Why did all 5 servers start the event at the same time? Isn't Halloween our holiday? Why can't we participate in the local server's holiday and celebrate our holiday together? This is 2F** King fake. Therefore, the players from the Naraka server and the other servers protested one after another, saying that the local players should not participate. They had to curb their speed of development and balance the strength of the 5 servers. Naturally, Lu Wu saw their protest. After some thought, he still posted a reply. That was the general meaning of the post. In order to show that the people of the world were one family, the sharing of holiday activities in the future would be launched at the same time across all servers, with no exceptions. At this moment, the players from the Naraka server and the other servers were filled with question marks. Stupid officials, that's not what you said in the beginning. You said that the people of the world were one family? When the local players were beating us up brutally, did they ever think about our family? Chapter 683. Event Notification. The Give You a Fright event has started. All players in the server will receive a transformation candy. Go and collect your terror points. At this moment, many of the monsters had the urge to flip the table. Detective Conan, Teletubbies, Aral, Pikachu, Luffy, Super Saiyan event reward. Triple the arena points for every win. The monsters could not help but cover their faces when they saw the group of idiotic players. Many players had researched a lot of information and started to transform based on the things that people were afraid of. As Lu Wu released the event announcement, the players in the forum started to discuss the event intensely. The Halloween event that Lu Wu started had a huge response among the players. The content of the discussion was also very different. Basically, they were discussing how to get more coins from the stupid officials. There were also jack-o'-lanterns inside and outside the buildings. Twisted ancient trees grew in some areas, and crows flew across the sky from time to time. The atmosphere was gloomy. The live chat channel was full of discussions. Headless Horseman restrains. Bigfoot, Abomination, Centaur rules of the event. Each form can restrain 3 creatures of the corresponding form. Touching the restrained target will result in the death of the target. Players from the server in the same faction must work together to ensure that the number of players in the same faction is the highest before the event ends. Each map can accommodate up to 100,000 players. 20,000 players will be randomly selected from each server to participate. Introduction. After the event starts, all participating players will be teleported to the event map, Halloween Forest. They will receive a random special form. Players from the same server will form a faction and work together to eliminate players from the opposing faction. As the game notification sounded, the event officially started. As the day of the event approached, the main cities of all the servers had a brand new look. The sunny sky instantly turned gloomy, and night fell before it was even night. It was just a game. Since it could not scare anyone, the most important thing was to have fun. The scaring event had officially started. Within a short period of time, Lu Wu's official post was pushed to the top of the hot post list, on the homepage by the players. Not only was this happening in the local server, but it was also happening in other servers. Suddenly, one turned into SpongeBob SquarePants, and the other turned into Patrick Star. "Hey, SpongeBob SquarePants, let's go catch a jellyfish." The players, who were already prepared, took out the transformation candy from the channel, swallowed it, and began to imagine their new forms. Zombies, mummies, headless horsemen, Bigfoot, vampires, werewolves, death gods, skeletons, Frankenstein, centaurs, ghosts, demons, medusas, abominations. Refuse to give candy, activity skill no cooldown. Since this event was a server-wide event, there was bound to be competition. Before the event officially started, players from all the major servers were already threatening each other. Ha ha ha, I've also discovered this problem. It's not strange that I've seen so many of them. Their mental fortitude is too strong. Just now, I met a guy who set up a sinister environment in the burial grounds to scare me. I was extremely calm. If it wasn't for the fact that I can't attack when I'm in a different form, I even had the impulse to turn him into experience. This was because when they tried to scare these players who had transformed into anime characters, they often couldn't help but laugh out loud. Their efforts were instantly broken. Not only did they fail to scare the players, but they also felt embarrassed. Halloween Event Announcement. Event 3. Monster Battle. Event Duration. 20 to 2400 hours. Event Reward. After this event, a Halloween event gift pack will be given based on the number of candies on the players. The more candies on the players, the higher the reward. At the same time, the first player will be chosen based on the total number of candies on each server. All the players in this server will be rewarded with an event title. 10,000 terror points. 1 piece of purple quality equipment above level 200. You can choose any part other than your weapon. Mischief. Activity skill 20 minutes cooldown. Event 4. Cross-server tournament. Event duration. All day 100 terror points. 50 soul coins. There were even more perverted players who thought from the human heart's perspective. They transformed into disgusting worms in an attempt to scare the female players. All of them had been through the baptism of blood and fire, and had seen many ferocious ghosts and monsters. The players' mental fortitude was terrifyingly strong. In the land of Bakey, there were players who raised scythes and dressed up as death gods, while others transformed into ferocious zombies. In short, there were all kinds of horrifying species. Event 2. Trick or Treat. Event duration. 15 to 2000 hours. However, as the event progressed, the players soon discovered a very serious problem. The existence of this group of idiotic players was like a clear stream in the event. While they were having fun in the land of Bakey, they also made the players who wanted to earn terror points feel very frustrated. Because of this, the players soon began to play trick. Motherf asterisk cur, I turned into a worm just to find a female target. In the end, I only earned 100 terror points after going around a few rounds. You guys can't do this, can't you just have fun? Slams the table crazily, JPG. Accompanied by the idiotic laughter, the two of them ran out of the mansion of the dead with their nets. Ask for candy, activity skill 20 minutes cooldown. Event 1. Give you a scare, event duration. All day, event reward. The winning player of the Phalanx camp will receive a Halloween gift pack. This was because they never followed the official rules when they participated in the event. They did whatever they wanted to do. 3,500 terror points. 1 month dungeon free pass, unlimited. They all said that their server was the strongest, and the others were just little brothers. At this moment, they only had one goal, which was to scare all the players they encountered so that they could earn terror points in exchange for the event reward. They were all players, and it was the same event. What right did they have to show off like this? This is too much. I was fooled by a player just now. He pretended to be scared. I was quite happy at that time, but when I looked at the terror points I earned, I realized that it was only 0. He was definitely faking it, that D*Ned mage. All kinds of cartoon characters appeared one after another, and the atmosphere of a Chunibu permeated all the servers. This made the other players gnash their teeth, but there was nothing they could do. Event note: when a player without candy is messed with, he or she will be cursed and turn into a jack-o'-lantern. A player from the same server will need to use a candy to save him or her. Event introduction: after the start of the cross-server battle, when the players enter the arena through cross-server matchmaking, an additional cross-server matchmaking mode will be activated. Each player will be given 3 cross-server matchmaking opportunities. The psychological quality of the Battle Royale players was too damn good. They realized that they could not scare their opponents at all. Their psychological quality was unbelievably strong. Ah ha ha ha. Event reward. However, it was not as simple as changing their forms to scare people. Many players had even created some special tools that could be used to scare people, and started to commit crimes in the land of Bakey. 500 terror points, 1 piece of level 100 blue equipment, random, event introduction. During the event period, the server cross-server mode will be activated. Players can go to other servers and ask for candy from other players. At the same time, all players will have a festival candy every 10 minutes. This candy is inedible, and when players ask for candy from other servers, they can choose to give candy or reject it. The rejected player can use the edible skill, Troublemaker, which has a 30% chance of reducing the candy on the other party by 1/3. Event introduction. During the event period, all players will be given a transformation candy. After consuming it, the player will be able to change their form according to their will, unlimited. During the event period, players will be able to use their transformation to scare other players. Whenever the target player is scared, the player will gain terror points, which can be used to exchange for event items. Since the event this time relied on earning terror points to exchange for rewards, the players would naturally consider changing their forms to be as frightening as possible. This was the only way to reap benefits from other people's fear. There were many other examples like this. During the event period, this group of idiotic players would always play tricks, so they were called the cancer of the event. Alright, Patrick Star. Many players were full of confidence in their appearance, and they felt that they would definitely receive a hefty reward for the event that day. Mummy counters. Headless Horseman, Medusa, Spectre for example, in the Mansion of the Dead, 2 players looked at each other, then took out their transformation candy and swallowed it. In a short period of time, all sorts of monsters appeared. The surrounding players were petrified when they saw this, thinking that they might have entered the wrong game. The simplest and most effective method was to suddenly appear and scare the other party, using the element of surprise to gain terror points. This group of players would always have the same mentality. The players who initially chose to observe the situation also swallowed their transformation candy at this time. Unless they were lucky enough to meet a newbie that had just entered the game, they might be able to gain some terror points. However, the veteran players were basically the same. Not only could they not scare the other party, they could even make the other party laugh out loud. Zombie counters. Mummy, vampire, werewolf, alright, can you guys stop scaring me? Do you think I'm scared just because you turned into a ghost? I don't know how many I've killed in a day, can you be more creative? I walked around the mansion of the dead and didn't scare a single person, nor was I scared even once. I'm about to become a Buddhist. This undoubtedly made many players who were ready for a big fight extremely depressed. They felt that the opponents were too strong and too difficult to deal with. Can't they just carry on with the event? This is too much. To the previous poster, I also met a primary school student and tried to scare him, but he waved his hand at me in disdain, telling me that it's enough. I was confused and a little autistic at that time. I've been thinking about this for a long time. I thought that I could become the trump card of this event, Chiochio wailing. JPG. The more advanced version was to find an environment, set it up, and then wait for the target player to fall into the trap. Then, they would scare the target player. The random transformation was as follows: 32 types 1500 terror points, 1 level 160 blue quality equipment, random. As the event progressed, most players encountered this problem. Then, in addition to the monsters and monsters in the land of Beiki, there was also the aura of an idiot. This was exactly what Lu Wu wanted to see, because it would be more fun. I met a primary school student, he was scared by me, and I actually got 200 terror points. Awesome, I think I found a way to get rich, laughing emoji. Chapter 684. While the first wave of activities was still going on, the appearance of some idiotic players changed the atmosphere of the activities. This group of players carried out the activities with the attitude that everything was fine as long as they were happy. It even destroyed the originally gloomy and terrifying atmosphere, causing the idiotic atmosphere to spread across all the major servers. At this moment, the players who were doing the activities gritted their teeth in anger. Most of them did not get much terror points until the end of the activities. Therefore, this group of players could only choose to hold a grudge. They would remember the names of these poisonous players. When they meet outside the main city in the future, they would know what pain was and they would be happy. As the first activity ended, the second activity began. Trick or treat. This second wave of activities was a server-wide activity. Several teleportation portals appeared in the main city of every server, allowing players to go to other servers to cause trouble. For this wave of activities, the players of all the servers were already prepared. Although they did not discuss it in advance, it was as if it was premeditated. A large number of players from all 4 servers landed in Beiki at the same time. This time, they all chose the original server as their target. The players who had yet to use the teleportation portal to go to other servers immediately became the targets of these players. Before the first candy in their hands could even warm up, it would be snatched by players from other servers. While they were asking for candy, the players of the 4 major servers even tried to attack the NPCs in the Mansion of the Dead. At this moment, they triggered a hidden reward. They were pleasantly surprised to find that every time they asked for a reward from an NPC, they would receive a return of 1 to 100 soul coins. Of course, it could also be a notification that the request was invalid. Therefore, the ladies of the Wood Spirit clan had a mental breakdown. After all, they had too many assets. Now that they were being targeted by the wolves, they would be finished. Without the slightest hesitation, under the leadership of the Wood Spirit clan's leader, the entire Wood Spirit clan crossed the teleportation portal and prepared to go sightseeing in other servers for a while. Otherwise, they were afraid that they would be robbed by this group of locusts. We can't afford to offend them, let's go. Regarding this, the original server players were also gnashing their teeth in hatred. However, the rules were fair and just. They were usually too domineering, so there was nothing they could do now that they were targeted. However, they remembered this grudge and would definitely take revenge in the future. On the other hand, the players from other servers felt refreshed, feeling that they had finally won. And at this stage, the idiotic players also played their own trick. After learning that they could ask for candy from an NPC, this group of idiotic players formed a group. They surrounded an NPC and demanded all kinds of candy. Moreover, all of them wore arrogant expressions as if they were asking for a debt. The captured NPCs knew what cruelty was, and they understood what it meant to return to freedom overnight. Many of the NPCs felt like crying. It wasn't easy to make money. Not only were we being exploited by the bosses behind the scenes, but the players were also exploiting us. Of course, there were NPCs who weren't afraid. This was just like Tong Gua. Many NPCs had fled, but he was still calmly strolling around the mansion of the dead in his little avatar. His mentality was much more stable. You guys can have whatever you want. I'll admit defeat if I can get any soul coins. After all, his assets were in the negative, and he still owed a lot of debt. It was impossible to get soul coins from him. The shameless Tong Gua even took the initiative to ask for candy from the players. With the mentality of giving it a try, he didn't expect to really get a lot of candies. At this moment, Tong Gua knew that asking for candy was mutual, and that NPCs also had human rights. Hence, he became even more arrogant and chased after the cross-server players in the mansion of the dead to exploit them. Come on, let's hurt each other. Whoever is a coward is a coward. Tong Gua skillfully demonstrated the saying, "The barefooted are not afraid of the barefooted," and let the players who thought they could get a fortune from the NPCs know that poverty is power. Besides that, Yen Mai from the Phantom Fish clan also followed Tong Gua to cause trouble in the mansion of the dead. The entire server was supported by the two poor guys, Tong Gua and Yen Mai. As for the other NPCs, they were either hiding or taking refuge in other servers. The moment the event ended, the game notification appeared, and the ranking of the total number of candies in each server was revealed. Ranking of the most candies in each server for Halloween 1st place, Demonic Spine Region 2nd place, Naraka Region 3rd place, Land of Tsangshu 4th place, Xianfeng Tribe Region 5th place. Land of Beiki. The original server players were very upset that they didn't get the first place, but they couldn't do anything about it. They had always been in the first place, and they were used to it. They didn't expect to be targeted by others in this event, and they suffered a setback. However, the original server players knew very well that they would get their revenge. Soon, the third event was launched. The Battle of Demons. Along with the notification of the start of the event, the players decisively opened the event panel and clicked on the matching button. Suddenly, white lights flashed continuously in the 5 servers, and every 20,000 players were paired with 80,000 players from other servers. Then, they were transported into the Halloween forest, and the role-playing competition began. Under the bright moonlight, the silent forest was suddenly filled with a large number of evil creatures, including werewolves, vampires, zombies, and so on. The competition began again. This time, the players from other servers could no longer target the original server, because they could only distinguish between friend and foe, but they couldn't tell which server they were from. This undoubtedly made many players from other servers unhappy. It was rare for them to have a chance to suppress the original server, so they wanted to suppress the original server to the last place, and never let them make a comeback. Therefore, they tried to communicate with each other, planning to kill all the original server players first, and then compete for the top 4 positions. However, how could the original server players let them do as they wished? Therefore, whenever 2 teams of players met, such a scene would occur. "Brother, which server are you from?" "We're on the same side, we're not from the original server." In short, regardless of whether they were from the original server or not, the original server players would say that they were not from the original server when they answered. Of course, there were times when things got out of hand. When asked which server they were from, the original server players would reply that they were from the European server. However, the other party just so happened to be from the European server, and they saw through it on the spot, so a fight was inevitable. Of course, a fight was also very strategic, and at the same time, luck was also very important. If they were unlucky and encountered a small team of players, they might all have the type of monsters that countered their own side. At that time, other than running away, there was only death waiting for them if they fought head-on. The entire event map was filled with scheming and plotting. Apart from Voldemort, only players with outstanding intelligence could survive until the end. The teams they led were always able to create an advantage for their respective camps, and eventually led their camps to victory. This group of highly intelligent players would calculate the number of players in the map in the camp's live chat channel, and the number of players of different types, and then plan the subsequent confrontation based on that. When luck could not determine success or failure, strategy would become the key to success in this event. For example, in the battle of one of the map, Yin Xiaoqi led the camp, and the entire battle situation was under her control. After calculating the total number of monsters at the current stage, she led a group of players who chose to choose zombies hide, and then let the other players fight outside. Step by step, there were almost only 4 types of monsters left on the map: zombies, mummies, vampires, and werewolves. At this time, Yin Xiaoqi let the players who randomly turned into zombies enter the arena. Under the restraining effect, the other 3 types of monsters could not kill zombies at all, and in terms of the rules, they were completely restrained. This was like Tianji's horse race, but there were more variables in the rules. Although the number of monsters at the current stage could be seen in the upper right corner, it was definitely an extremely difficult thing to control. In the final stage, even though the other party far outnumbered them, Yin Xiaoqi still won the competition. This wave of event was very exciting for the players. In the absence of a command, how to avoid monsters that countered them, and at the same time, how to hunt and kill enemy players that countered them was full of uncertainty. No one knew what type of monster they would encounter next. When the event-ending notification sounded, the event was also coming to an end. However, at this time, the entire Battle League was in an uproar. The cross-server arena was a part of every event at this stage. Many players would try to compete with other players with different growth systems at this time. However, in this aspect, the original server had a great advantage. It could be said that the original players dominated half of the cross-server arena. Even if the other server players did not want to admit this, they had to face it. Since it was an all-day event, many players were immersed in other activities, and after finishing their 3 cross-server matches, they would not pay attention to the situation in the cross-server arena. However, it was different this time, because there was a pinnacle battle. At this time, in room 52325 of the cross-server arena, the number of spectators was increasing exponentially. As the arena map loaded successfully, the spectating players appeared in an area similar to the ancient Roman Colosseum, and they were in the audience seats. Below them, the silhouettes of 2 players appeared. One of them was Ao Jian, who represented the top combat strength of the original server, and the other was the Asia server's recognized number 1 powerhouse, Northstar One Blade. The players were excited when they found out that the battle between the 2 was about to begin. The forum would often discuss who was stronger between the 2 of them. However, without a real battle, the players from the Asia server and the original server thought that the swordsman on their side was stronger, and they could not convince the other party. However, this time, it was a face-to-face battle. Especially the players from the original server and the Asia server, they were overwhelmed with emotions, eager to know who would obtain the title of the number 1 swordsman. As the number of spectators increased crazily, the playing system of the audience seats was activated. Otherwise, the entire arena's audience seats would not be able to accommodate such a large number of players. The countless audience seats were connected to the main arena's plane, ensuring that all the spectators felt as if they were in the arena, as if the 2 people were right in front of them. As the game notification sounded, the barrier in the middle of the arena disappeared. At this moment, the spectating players held their breath. However, what the players did not expect was that neither Aogn nor Northstar One Blade made the first move. Instead, they looked at each other. At this moment, Northstar One Blade spoke first. "I've seen many of your battle videos. You're very strong and you're a master of the sword." Aogn smiled faintly. "I've also seen your battle videos. Your swordsmanship is very domineering. I've been looking forward to a battle with you, and now it's finally here. However, before the battle, can you answer a question in my mind?" Northstar One Blade suddenly asked. Aogn was stunned, but he still nodded. "Your swordsmanship is very pure. How did you do it?" When Northstar One Blade first entered the Battle League, he watched many of Aogn's battle videos on the forum and realized that his sword was not mixed with any external force. It was too pure, and it was a little unbelievable. This was also something that Northstar One Blade had always been puzzled about. Now that he saw Aogn, he naturally wanted to ask about it. "Because I don't have feelings," crossed out. "For the sake of the sword, I've given up many things, including my true love." At this point, Aogn's face showed a hint of indifference, but his heart ached slightly. "You can even give up your lover? I'm afraid your swordsmanship has gone astray." Northstar One Blade shook his head and said. He walked on the path of the emotion sword, which deepened his swordsmanship. From the moment he started practicing swordsmanship, his swordsmanship had condensed into feelings. Love, hatred, familial love, and so on. These were the key to the growth of his swordsmanship. To be able to reach this stage, Northstar One Blade felt that feelings were indispensable. In his opinion, feelings were far greater than the sword in his hand. Therefore, Northstar One Blade felt that Aogn's path of the emotionless sword had gone astray. Hearing this, Aogn's mouth twitched. However, he still said with a cold expression, "Women will only affect the speed of my sword." Hearing this, Northstar One Blade subconsciously looked at his right arm, the platycodon, and then a strange expression appeared on his face. He suddenly realized that although they both used swords, they did not seem to have a common language. At this time, in the audience seats, a woman suddenly stood up and pulled out her machete. F***ck Aogn, you bastard. Women affect the speed of your sword? If you have the guts, say it to my face. See if I don't chop off your *SS. Dear mother, don't be agitated, don't be agitated. Seeing this, Mo Xiaoxin hurriedly pulled back Mo Lanlan, who was agitated and wanted to jump into the arena to chop people. At this moment, Mo Xiaoxin could not help but curse in his heart. However, he was also extremely helpless towards this father of his, who had no feelings for him. "You said you want to compete, so let's compete. Why are you acting tough?" Chapter 685. They both used swords, but after a short exchange, both of them realized that they were not the same kind of people. Aogn was the kind of person who was obsessed with swords. His feelings for swords ran through his entire life. Swords used to be his everything. Northstar Blade was the complete opposite. He wielded his sword for love, using it to protect, to take revenge, to fulfill promises, and so on. The sword was more like a tool for him to achieve his goals. His sword will was condensed with emotions. But most of the time, his strength was not enough for him to put it into action. Therefore, his sword will grew stronger as his emotions changed. Although both of them valued the swords in their hands, the inner meaning was completely different. At the end of the conversation, both of them stood still. As Aogn waved his hand, the 9 spiritual swords behind him floated up and lined up in front of him. "Come on, let me see if your swordsmanship is stronger or mine." Northstar Blade nodded and reached out his left hand to grab his right arm. His right arm fell off by itself and turned into a 5-foot-long tachi in a flash. The battle was about to begin. At this moment, the onlookers were extremely excited. Some meddlesome players even opened bets on the forum and gave out odds, ready to earn some soul coins. Of course, such players would be banned by Lu Wu for 3 days on the grounds that online gambling was prohibited. The players had been looking forward to this battle for a long time. Not only the players from the original server and the Asia server, but players from other servers also came after hearing the news. They all wanted to see who was stronger between Aogn and Northstar Blade in this pinnacle level battle. The number of spectators reached an unprecedented high in a short period of time. Amidst the anticipation of the players, Northstar Blade, who was standing at the side of the arena, made the first move. He moved his right foot forward and slashed forward with his tachi. In an instant, a crimson sword will appeared in front of Northstar Blade and swept toward Aogn. Seeing this, Aogn's expression turned solemn. He did not dare to be careless against Northstar Blade. His fingers moved forward, and suddenly the 9 spiritual swords rotated rapidly and lined up in a sword formation, shattering the incoming sword will on the spot. At this moment, Northstar Blade moved. He suddenly took 3 steps forward and turned his left wrist. 3 streaks of sword will condensed and swept toward Aogn from the front. Aogn looked calm. He separated 3 spiritual swords to meet the red sword will, while the other 6 spiritual swords spread out and stabbed Beichen from both sides. Northstar Oneblade didn't stop in the slightest. Letting out an enraged roar, he raised his katana high into the air and slashed it out in front of him. Taiyuan swordsmanship. Fall. The platycodon turned black at this moment, and the pitch-black flames climbed up from the sword hilt, igniting the sword body. Boom! The raging flame attacked forward, repelling the 3 spiritual swords in front of Aogn. The 6 spiritual swords on the left and right sides were entangled in the air by the black flame and could not escape for a while. Northstar Blade immediately seized the opportunity. He crouched down and passed between the 3 swords on his left and right, heading straight for Proud Sword. The Tai Dao burning with black flames suddenly fell at this moment. The surging sword intent condensed on the sword body, releasing a dazzling light. Aogn was shocked and immediately controlled the 3 spiritual swords in front of him to line up in a sword formation. Boom! Under the attack, the 3 spiritual swords trembled violently and made a buzzing sound. Aogn, who was behind them, was pushed several meters away by the violent sword intent. What a strong talent in swordsmanship! What a strong sword intent! Facing Northstar Oneblade for the first time, Aogn found that he had completely underestimated the strength of Northstar Oneblade. That was the truth. Although Aogn's sword intent was pure, his talent in swordsmanship was far inferior to Northstar Oneblade, who was recognized as the most talented swordsman in the history of J Country. Northstar Oneblade's name was a legend in J Country's circle, and he represented a legend. He was an absolute powerhouse who broke through the catastrophe of life and death during the age of Dharma ending and comprehended the spiritual sword technique. Under this attack, the violent sword intent formed out of thin air and kept condensing, crazily attacking Aogn's nerve. Aogn suspected that if he had not suppressed Northstar Oneblade in terms of level and attributes, he would not have been able to deal with such an attack calmly. He would have to pay a price. The sword intent that formed out of thin air rushed towards him. At this moment, Aogn made a sword gesture with one hand and stretched his hand forward. The 9 spiritual swords that shared the same thought suddenly turned back and arranged themselves in a fan shape behind him. Then, Aogn stabbed the tachi that was coming towards him with one finger. His finger and the tachi collided at this moment. At this moment, Aogn no longer held back and released one of his strongest moves, the 10th sword. And the 10th sword was himself. With the support of the 9 spiritual swords behind him, the sword intent condensed by this finger was far stronger than before. It was as if his entire body had transformed into a sharp sword that showed off its ability. Boom! In the midst of the sword chi, the 2 forces pressed against each other at the point of collision, forming two circular barriers that offset each other. At this moment, the bricks on the ground of the arena were shattered and flew to both sides. The sword intent of the two began to strengthen in the stalemate. At this moment, the two began to compete in the sword intent. Seeing this scene, the surrounding players exclaimed in satisfaction. They were not even willing to blink their eyes. This was more immersive than those special effects films. At this moment, the players from the original server and the Asia server were crazily spamming the live chat channel of the spectator seats, cheering for their own players. At this moment, the 9 spiritual swords behind Aogn trembled, and he took a step forward. The soaring sword intent emerged and slowly condensed a giant colorful sword behind him. Northstar blade slowly slid backwards under the pressure of the attack. Seeing this scene, the players from the original server began to cheer. Awesome, my Aogn is indeed the best in the world of Sword Dao. 666, the battle of special effects. The funds are burning. This is too exciting. In comparison, the special effects of my skills are nothing. Too wild. No wonder he is a powerhouse in the Ghost King realm. His battle is so gorgeous and cool. It gives me the motivation to become stronger. At this moment, the situation gradually tilted towards Aogn's side. As the giant sword behind Aogn gradually condensed, the sword intent continued to strengthen. At this time, the index finger of his right hand also bloomed with colorful streamers. Roar! At the moment when the giant sword was completely condensed, Aogn let out a low roar. Then, he suddenly retracted his right hand. When his index finger pointed forward again, the giant sword behind him also stabbed forward. Boom! The wind howled and the giant sword suddenly hit Kikyo. Under the blow, Northstar's sword was sent flying and his body was thrown into the air. The giant sword below also followed Aogn's direction and flew towards Northstar's sword in the sky. Seeing this scene, the players from the original server cheered, knowing that the battle was about to end. On the other hand, the players from the Asia server could not help but sigh, feeling that they had lost to the Motherf *King original server again. However, at this time, an unexpected scene appeared. Northstar's sword slowly dragged his Tachi in the air. The speed was very slow, but it dragged out countless afterimages. At the moment when the Tachi was raised horizontally in front of him, he whispered, "Kikyo, come with me." The Kikyo sword trembled at this time as if it was responding to Northstar sword. Countless lines appeared on its surface, and the flame that was extinguished by Aogn's sword intent was ignited again. Taiyuan swordsmanship, sacrifice. As Northstar sword murmured, his eyes became extremely determined and his Tachi suddenly slashed towards the giant sword below. The black flame that was formed by the sword aura that filled the sky gathered and climbed onto the blade of the sword. Along with Northstar sword's slash from top to bottom, it transformed into a crescent-shaped flaming sword aura. At the moment when the sword fell, Aogn's face showed an expression of disbelief. This was because he realized that the sword intent inside the giant sword was being drawn out and continuously surged towards the flaming sword aura, becoming a part of it. In the confrontation between the two forces, one's loss and the other's gain, the disadvantage turned into an advantage in the blink of an eye. When the flaming sword aura broke through the shadow of the giant sword and smashed it into specks of starlight, Aogn could not help but be stunned. Not only was Aogn stunned, but even the players who were watching the battle were dumbfounded. They had all heard of Northstar sword's name. He was recognized as the #1 expert in the Asia server and had never been surpassed by any other player in the Asia server. On the other hand, Aogn was one of the strongest cheaters in the original server. Even so, in reality, the players were more inclined to believe that Aogn would win. This was because Aogn was almost an undefeated legend in the eyes of many people. At least in the battles, he had challenged many experts and had never been defeated. Moreover, His battle record of consecutive victories in the 1524 arena was even more proof of Ao Jian's terrifying combat strength. Although the Asia server players were saying tough words, deep down in their hearts, they were actually helpless and felt that Northstar Sword would be defeated in this battle. Many Asia server players grew up watching Ao Jian's videos, so they were very familiar with Ao Jian's combat strength. In the eyes of many Asia server players, it was almost impossible for him to be defeated. However, this time, Northstar Sword shattered the impossible. At the moment when the flaming sword aura smashed the giant sword, it seemed to symbolize the destruction of a legend. The players who were watching the battle subconsciously held their breath. Impossible! At this time, Ao Jian's face was ferocious as he condensed all the sword intent in his body and pointed his right index finger. At the moment when it collided with the flaming sword aura, Ao Jian's figure was engulfed by the flames. The sword intent was gradually weakened in the offset. Eventually, he could not hold on any longer and fell to the ground with a loud bang. He began to pant heavily. At this time, Northstar Sword landed on the ground and waved his hand to disperse the sword aura. However, he did not attack again. Instead, he pressed the kikyu on his right shoulder and turned it into his right arm. I lost, Ao Jian said with a pained expression. Looking at Ao Jian, who was a little lost, Northstar Sword could not help but sigh, but he did not know how to persuade him. Sometimes, the competition between swordsmen was so cruel. It was a competition between their sword hearts and sword intent. The defeat of one party would often cause the other party's sword heart to waver. I've been pursuing swordsmanship all my life. Even if I condensed such a pure sword intent, I'm still not as good as you. At this moment, Ao Jian closed his eyes and felt a stabbing pain in his heart. Hearing this, Northstar Sword shook his head. You're wrong. Your sword intent is actually stronger than mine, but you haven't achieved true purity. I found that your sword intent has been mixed with other things and has lost its original realm. If your sword intent could really be as pure as it used to be, the person who would be defeated today would definitely be me. When saying this, Northstar Sword's expression was solemn. This was not him speaking blindly, but he had discovered Ao Jian's weakness during the battle. If it was a pure sword intent, its lethality would inevitably increase by several levels, and it would not be used by his own sword intent. When watching Ao Jian's battle video, Northstar Sword studied Ao Jian's sword intent and found that this person's sword intent was very pure, and its lethality was more than a level higher than his own sword intent. This was also the reason why he asked Ao Jian why he could have such a pure sword intent before the battle. However, this time, Northstar Sword found that Ao Jian's sword intent was not as pure as it used to be. It had obviously changed, and it was mixed with other things. This was undoubtedly Ao Jian's biggest flaw, and it was also something that Northstar Sword did not expect. In fact, although Northstar Sword did his best in this battle, it was more for the sake of learning and learning. He did not think that he could beat Ao Jian. At most, it would be 3-7, with him having 30% and Ao Jian having 70%. Upon hearing this, Ao Jian was stunned. Have I changed? At this moment, he suddenly thought of two people. It was also the appearance of these two fetters that disturbed his firm Taoist heart. One was Mo Xiaoxin, and the other was Mo Lanlan. He thought that he was alone in the world, and he had no other pursuits other than the way of the sword. However, their appearance shook his rock-solid pursuit of the way of the sword, giving rise to many emotions in his heart. At this moment, Ao Jian's expression became complicated. In the audience seats, Mo Xiaoxin's eyes widened at this moment. He naturally heard the conversation between Ao Jian and Northstar Sword. At this moment, he panicked and could not help but look at his mother, Mo Lanlan, and asked in a low voice, "Mother, do you think father will kill us in order to recast a pure sword intent? If so, his pursuit of the way of the sword will become smooth again." Hearing this, Mo Lanlan slapped the back of Mo Xiaoxin's head. As if she was not satisfied, she slapped him twice in a row. Who are you calling father? Who is your father? I picked you up, and you don't have a father. Mo Xiaoxin wanted to cry, but no tears came out. He quickly said, I don't have a father, I don't have a father, I only have my most beloved mother. Hearing this, Mo Lanlan glared at him and did not answer Mo Xiaoxin's question. Instead, she looked at Ao Jian in the arena with a murderous look in her eyes, causing Mo Xiaoxin to tremble. This family is so hard to live in. Not only is his mother extremely cruel, but his father also pursues the ultimate pure way of the sword. Who knows, he might kill his wife and son to prove his way. Damn it, it's a miracle that I'm still alive. It's so hard for me. At this moment, in the arena, North Star Sword looked at Ao Jian, who was struggling. He could not help but sigh and then said, We are all human beings, and emotional fetters are inevitable. Since we can't get rid of them, why should we try to erase them? They are not burdens, but strength. These feelings that are hard to let go might make you stronger. You should try to accept them, not resist them. Hearing this, Ao Jian was shocked. He slowly raised his head to look at North Star Sword and said, Emotion sword? That's right. My sword intent comes from my emotions. I've never regarded it as a burden. On the contrary, it has always given me endless power. Although the pure sword intent is strong enough, when you reach the end of this path, you will completely lose your emotions and become a puppet controlled by the sword intent. This is not the path we should take. At that time, you will no longer be you, no matter how strong you are. North Star Sword's words were like a blow to the head, shattering the stubbornness in Ao Jian's heart. At this moment, Ao Jian thought of the grief and helplessness he felt when he lost the love of his life. The pure sword will give him great strength, but it also cost him a lot. Since it was so difficult to let go of those regretful things, why should he resist them? Since there was a chance to start over, he should firmly grasp it and not let it leave him. Crack! At this moment, Ao Jian's pure sword heart was broken. At the same time, a smile appeared on his face. Ao Jian smiled as if he had been reborn. No matter how many opponents he had defeated before, he had never smiled. However, this failure made him smile. Seeing this scene, North Star Sword also smiled. Congratulations, you've comprehended it. At this moment, North Star Sword sensed a vigorous new sword will growing in Ao Jian's body. Although it was not as pure as before, it was full of vitality and vitality. Thank you. Ao Jian looked at North Star Sword sincerely and thanked him. You're welcome. I hope you can become stronger and return to your peak. I look forward to fighting you again. North Star Sword said with a smile. I will definitely defeat you. Ao Jian nodded solemnly. Alright, it's a deal. At this moment, Ao Jian's figure slowly faded out of the arena, choosing to admit defeat. In this cross-server tournament, the two parties are Beiki player, Ao Jian, and Devil Spine player, North Star Sword. The winner is North Star Sword, and he has obtained tournament points. When the game notification sounded, the audience was in an uproar. The Asia server players were howling crazily. The top player of their server had defeated Ao Jian from the original server. This was definitely a legendary moment for them, worthy of being recorded in the server's history. The feeling of ending a legend could only be described as exhilarating. On the other hand, the original players seemed to be in a daze. They could not believe that Ao Jian would lose to North Star Sword. This was really unbelievable to them. Ao Jian had always been so strong and was always regarded as one of the top 3 players in the entire server. But now, he actually lost. At the same time, the players from the Naraka server, Africa server, and the European server were also ignited with passion. This battle made them realize that the legend was not unbreakable. Even the latecomers could break through the legend and stand at the peak. North Star Sword's victory gave the players from the other 4 main servers, who had always been suppressed by the original server, endless fighting spirit. At this moment, a concept was deeply rooted in the hearts of the players. Even the original server's cheat was not invincible. As long as one worked hard, everyone had a chance. When the screen of the arena faded, the players returned to the game. However, the popularity of this battle did not stop. The players were discussing it in the forum. Many professional players began to explain the battle and even provided data support to analyze the key reasons for the victory and defeat of this battle. It could be said that the players in the entire server were shocked by this battle. After exiting the arena, Mo Xiaoxin was still in a daze. At this time, his friend list suddenly changed. Mo Xiaoxin subconsciously clicked on it. Ao Jian, are you there? Seeing that it was a message from Ao Jian, Mo Xiaoxin shrank his neck, feeling frightened. Mom, dearest, Ao Jian seems to be attacking us. What should we do? Hearing this, Mo Lanlan slowly pulled out her machete and said with a cold expression, Kill! After the battle with Ao Jian, North Star Sword also returned to the main city, Blazing Sky City. He was greeted by the blessings and cheers of Awami and other guild members. The whole Blazing Sky City was as lively as a festival. Helpless, North Star Sword could only brace himself to deal with them before he escaped. After a short rest, North Star Sword clicked on the activity menu again. Looking at the number of cross-server battles he had left, he clicked on the match button with anticipation. About 5 seconds later, a game notification appeared. Frowny face game notification. Match successful. Your opponent is the Bakey player, Hu He. Please prepare for battle.